5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
How about we do it again?
6, 7, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I fallen.
Okay, let's try one more
I
time.
definitely.
Ready?
I can move you. Making reveal. Making reveal.
Say 6,
6,
5,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, Rank and Review listeners. This is your host and random Canadian, Larry Parsons, and we're knocking on the door of Halloween 2017. And yes, Rank and Review is giving you a clip show. I apologize, I am sick, and I'm organizing people, I'm producing a bunch of new episodes, and there's more new Rank and Review to come, but yes, we're doing a clip show. But what I want you to do is I want you to imagine that you're hosting 2 different Halloween parties. One Halloween party full of relative Halloween noobs. You know, people who want to have fun and enjoy the costumes and enjoy the spirit of Halloween, but who really don't want to have their nerves shredded. For that, I will give you 6 recommendations for a Halloween party fun. Once we get that out of the way, then I'll tell you 6 proper, scary Halloween night movies to screen to really impress those people out there who want to be scared on Halloween. So it's going to be a king-sized clip show, and it's going to come with the promise of more new Rank and Review right around the corner. Thank you for bearing with me. Please send me your feedback to rankandreview@gmail.com. Remember that we do talk spoilers, there is coarse language, and you can send your feedback to rankandreview@gmail.com. That's RANKNREVIEW@gmail.com. Thank you so much, you guys, and happy Halloween.
It began as a routine assignment.
Transylvania.
Where is that?
I don't know. It's over there someplace.
But beneath the surface
Transylvania's cute.
of this happy land, horror awaits them.
I'm investigating Frankenstein.
You mean the monster?
And a terrible secret lurks in the shadows.
I'm terribly sorry. We thought you were an animal.
He is.
Now they're discovering the truth
Did you see Dracula?
Yeah, when it first came out.
about the creatures of the night.
Shut up, you lowlife.
I'm lower.
The curse of the undead.
Did you want to hurt me?
Hurt you? No. Bite you?
The terror of the full moon.
Oh, yeah, I'm going into town.
And the monster that science created
Full house.
but could not destroy.
Does this hurt? Good. Everything hurts.
Jeff Goldblum, Ed Begley Jr.,
Hi, ladies.
Joseph Bologna, and Gina Davis
Tell me you want me to.
for a good time called
Transylvania 6, 5,000.
It's good, huh?
So let's travel back in time, Ashley.
Hey,
Yeah.
time travel.
It's the late 80s. Larry's like, I think 9 or 10, let's say. And he's visiting his dear friends, Scott and Karen. And they have cable stations with access to movies, and they have all these horror movies on tapes. And they like to show Larry horror movies. And Larry likes horror movies,
Yeah.
but they make Larry very scared. They make him uncomfortable, they give him tummy aches, they make him not able to sleep. So as much as he likes to watch horror movies, it's sort of like a double-edged sword. So a lot of the times I would like have these mainstay movies that I'd seen before, and I said, well, if we're going to watch a horror movie, let's watch these ones. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there were your Evil Dead 2s, or there's some of the funnier, lighter horror movies that you could even handle at a young age. A personal favorite of mine at the time, and again, I was 9 and 10, was Transylvania 5000, right? It had like all of the classic creatures, you know, in it, and it was funny.
Yeah.
It's a not particularly well remembered movie of the 80s. It's probably one of the more obscure titles even out of the list that I've asked you to watch here. It concerns Jeff Goldblum and Ed Begley Jr. as journalists hired to cover a story of some strange footage that came out of Transylvania. It's a complete sort of soup of other people's stories, right? We have the Frankenstein's monster, we have the Wolf Man, we have a water creature, and so they have to go in and uncover the story. This is the phase of Jeff Goldblum's career where he's doing a whole series of barely there performances in the 80s.
Yeah.
He seems sort of like not even half asleep, just bored, just indifferent to everything around him. He still somehow has like a residual Jeff Goldblum charm, but there's a whole series of them in the 80s where he really just seemed to like, his approach to the script would be to do as little as possible to the lines. I will deliver the lines on camera. That is what I am paid to do. I say this as a fan of Jeff Goldblum. Yeah. As a kid, I loved all of the payoffs in the movie. I loved that, you know, spoilers, we'll just jump right into it. There's a mad scientist who's creating all of these monsters, and even though they seem objectively frightening, once you get to know them, they're all kind of cute and okay. It's one of the 3 big high-profile Jeff Goldblum, Gina Davis are together in a movie because they're together in real life. The other being the remake of The Fly, which we'll be talking about during the 80s countdown in the next episodes. Okay. And another one being possibly more batshit crazy movie called Earth Girls Are Easy.
I have heard the title and not seen the film.
Yeah, I don't know. If you enjoyed this list of 6 movies and you're saying more crazy 80s, I will send you in that direction. That shit is crazy. But it's a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
Anyway, Transylvania 5000. I loved it since I was a kid, and it was one of those things I didn't see it for years and years and years and years again. And then I watched it when I was like 25 or something and was like, oh no! Oh no! I love this so much! And then I watched it again for the podcast, and I was 10 years old again.
Yeah.
So much like Howard the Duck, I have a hard time saying that Transylvania 5000 is a good movie, but I will say that it made me laugh, I am charmed by it, and I have enough personal 80s nostalgia for the cast and for the content that I'm a big fan.
Awesome.
But again, that doesn't necessarily mean it's great. Where do you land?
It is by no means a great movie. What it is extremely entertaining. It has a farce patter to it, especially the opening where they're Jeff Goldblum and Ed Begley Jr. are being like sent on assignment by Ed Begley Jr.'s like dad, who runs the cheap nothing paper that they work for. Right. And just the speed and the casualness with which all of that dialogue is delivered brought me right into the world.
Yeah.
It just keeps up that pace of like the crazy and crazy and crazy, and it's very theatrical. And for that, you know, I'm a theater kid, and I loved it.
Yeah. It doesn't really pretend to be existing in the real world in any kind of way, but nor is it winking at you. That's, I think, the difference, right? If they'd been constantly going, look at how arch this is.
If it had gone, look at me, look how funny I am, then it would have fallen like flat on its face. But it's not. It just keeps on moving. It just keeps on going.
It's also full of great faces. There's 2 scenes when I was a kid, I gotta say, going back to hanging out with my friends Scott and Karen, that we just... This is going to turn into a Simpsons review where I just start quoting bits from the movie. But the whole thing with Michael Richards and smell these, huh? You smell these. It's fresh. You like it. And now you smell this. He's lifting up shit and putting it in people's face, asking them to smell it. It doesn't make any fucking sense at all. It's completely insane. They don't ask you to understand it. They don't try to explain it. He's like, here's crazy Michael Richards, and now he's going to leave the scene, and everybody's going to look at each other awkwardly, and then the scene will continue. And I fucking love it. And the very initial scene where they first meet the mayor, once again played by Jeffrey Jones, and they ask him about the Frankenstein monster, and everybody in the government office just starts laughing hysterically at them. And they're just pointing and laughing, rolling on the floor, kicking the ground, laughing so hard that they think that there's Frankenstein in Transylvania. Right? Describing it doesn't sound funny, but trust me, if you watch the movie, it's funny. I have such a crush on Carol Kane. I've always had a crush on Carol Kane.
Understandable.
And she plays this, I don't know all the characters' names here. Loopy is her name. She's like this maid that works at the mansion where a lot of the action takes place. And she's so in love with the Igor figure of the movie that she's just following around like a puppy. And just, there's something so endearing about Carol Kane. I just love her. I remember I'd been thinking about her randomly, like, whatever, I haven't seen her in a while. And she popped up in this Kimmy Schmidt TV show.
Oh, okay.
What is it, Indestructible Kimmy Schmidt?
Unbreakable.
Unbreakable, thank you. Kimmy Schmidt. So she's still out there, she's still funny, she's still awesome, and I'm still attracted to her. But I think this movie is a big part of why. This movie and Scrooge, there's this Bill Murray Christmas movie where she plays a ghost who just beats the living piss out of Bill Murray. Always been a big fan of her, remain a big fan of her in this movie. Everybody sort of comes in and has fun little bits to play. If there's a weak link, and it hurts me to say it, it might be Gina Davis.
She just isn't given a whole lot to do, but my God, she's hot.
She is super hot, and that outfit that she's wearing is like embarrassingly sexualizing her, but she's playing like this temptress vampire, but she also has no confidence. She thinks she's really ugly and plain, right?
She's so cute.
Well, that's the thing. She's cute, but she's not funny. Everybody else around her is kind of being funny, and she's just being... she's fine.
She's
it's not
the
a
pretty
bad
girl.
performance.
Yeah. The pretty girl never gets to be funny.
It's not fair.
It's not fair.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts? Sorry, I just went off totally nerded out over.
Yeah. What was the other thing? Oh, the poor woman who Jeff Goldblum is trying to seduce the whole time, and I felt so bad for her because she's pulling all of the tricks that you try to get a guy to stop hitting on you. But he keeps, asking and pursuing her throughout. And when she, finally gave in at the end, I was like, aw, I was rooting for you to, spine up and get out of that. But okay.
Well, I talked about it a little bit in the introduction, just generally how the gender roles have changed so much. And these were, no didn't always seem to mean no in 80s movies. No meant, okay, I'll back off for a moment, but we'll continue this later. Right? And he's not aggressively handsy or anything like that, but she's clearly not into him, and he clearly is not receiving that.
Either doesn't notice or doesn't care.
Yeah. What do you mean you're not into me? I'm Jeff Goldblum. Are you crazy? There's something about that actress's performance too. She's got this really high-pitched voice. It's not even entirely her fault. I can't see her name. Teresa Genzel.
That's at some point the director should have told her to do something.
Yeah, there's a shrillness to it. She's supposed to be sort of the sweet, naive, almost innocent character initially, anyway. And what I respect about the movie is that all it really wants to do is put a smile on your face. That's all. It doesn't have any lofty goals. It's not teaching you. It's not about anything. It's not about Gina Davis becoming more confident. It's not about the mad scientist learning that he can, be helpful to people. It's not about these journalists breaking the big story and making famous. It's about a series of set-piece gags and keeping things moving at a good pace. And I think for the most part it does that well enough. In a way, I'm sort of surprised it's not one of the 80s movies that hasn't been remade or something, because it seems like there's a lot of comic potential in this. You get all of your sort of classic monsters in the movie. You got sort of slapstick fun, bouncy vibe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
we might just not be at a time that's like fun and bouncy enough in its humor for.
Yeah, I guess we're in
For
the
a
age of
remake
Game of
of
Thrones.
this.
Everything's got to be fucking super dark.
Everything's super dark.
I appreciate, like I said, just the earnest wish to be entertaining. All we want to do is make you smile. That's all.
And they do.
From the director of Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Adam and Barbara are ghosts.
What's the good of being a ghost if you can't frighten people away?
Their house is being haunted by the living,
Maybe the house could use a little remodeling.
and they can't scare them into leaving.
They said it's a little late to be neurotic.
So they're calling on Beetlejuice,
Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice!
who's no ordinary ghost.
You don't want his help.
Can you be scary? What do you think of this?
Now, the party's over,
You want somebody out of the house? I want to get somebody out of your house.
but the fun has just begun.
It's showtime.
So there once was a ghost named Beetlejuice. I saw Beetlejuice several times in the theater when I was a kid.
In the theater?
Yeah.
Lucky you.
I think it was still playing shortly after I'd moved to Saskatchewan. And I had lots of free time, and my parents were being very generous with me. I had a lot of pocket money. Mm-hmm. But it just kept on playing in the theater, and I kept on going to see it.
Full of piss and vinegar.
So I would go to movies by myself, like all popular boys.
Well, yeah.
So I'm a big fan of it, and I, like a lot of people, couldn't wait to see, where Tim Burton would go.
And... oh, the places he's gone.
Oh, the places he's gone. Up, down, and everywhere in between.
Really? Everywhere in between?
every creepy corner of the attic has been explored.
Well, yes.
I think that this is one of my personal favorites of Tim Burton's films, though.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The level of creativity in it and the level of love put into it is huge. And I like that they use stop motion animation in it. I mean, that's the kind of animation that doesn't fool anyone. I don't think you believe what you're seeing is real, but it looks awesome in its own way. And if you're going to follow this wacky movie to all of the absurd corners that it leads you anyway, why not? Why not the claymation?
Well, and that's just, I think Tim Burton was really starting to discover his aesthetic with this movie in a lot of ways. Like,
this palette would be returned to again and again.
And it just has gotten more and more refined as his movies have gone along. So.
And it's not even the world of the small town I would be talking about here. It's like... It's not even the world of the small town that I'd be talking about. It's the world of the model of the small town that Alec Baldwin's character has made, where everything doesn't necessarily look perfectly real. In fact, there's like... I think a deliberate artifice to everything.
Most definitely.
But it's consistent throughout the film, so you go with it. He did much similar with the portrayal of suburbia in Edward Scissorhands. Yeah. It wasn't real, but it was sort of a consistent vision,
and that's
the heightened
just
version of things.
And yeah, that's just it. When he dives into that aesthetic, and you have to go in sort of neck deep with him, and that makes it easier to sort of let the bad animation go. Yeah. It's part of the world.
And this story really agrees with him. This is definitely a world that he was sort of a good person to be leading the reins to. Basically, the plot is that the Maitlands, a very sugary sweet small town couple, have an unfortunate accident and they drown, and they come back as ghosts to live in their house. And they find that they have 100 years to enjoy their house and each other. Because they live good lives, I guess, and because of all the hard work that they've done in the house.
That's right.
And that a lot of the first act of the movie is them sort of adjusting to being ghosts.
Yes.
And we kind of explore the afterlife in a way that few films do, and that I quite like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's done in kind of a innocent way, I guess. It's approached with pretty wide eyes, and I think that's kind of nice. There's just I don't know, they're both really timid about the entire experience, and so it breaks you in, and Makes it accessible to younger people, I think, too.
They're just starting to get a handle on the new rules of the world. You can't leave your house or else you end up on Mars. I think it's was it Mars? Where there's a bunch of sandworms that chase you?
Yes.
And that time there travels differently. When you're there for only a few seconds, several hours go by on... It's craziness, things like that. All is going well for the Maitlands. They're learning to be ghosts. They're adapting to their new lives. And then Catherine O'Hara, Jeffrey Jones, Winona Ryder show up to remodel and destroy their quaint small town environment. Catherine O'Hara brings her personal assistant Otho. I don't know that actor's name. He actually showed up in Heathers, which I just talked about recently with Natara.
Oh, yeah.
Glenn Shaddix plays Otho. The comical interior design sort of... You get the idea that he makes his entire existence just somehow sucking money out of the Catherine O'Hara character. Well, whatever she needs, he is for her, be it interior design or be it a psychic or a paint, whatever she needs.
He's fabulous enough to be everything.
Yes, exactly. And Jeffrey Jones has moved the family out to the country because he needs to relax. I don't know if he had some sort of heart event or some sort of health issue that has compelled this to come along, but obviously you get the idea that relaxing doesn't come easily to him. Especially being married to this complete crazy person, Catherine O'Hara, with her bizarre artwork and her control issues, and his goth daughter.
Yes.
Played by Winona Ryder, also from Heathers.
Oh, wow.
The Maitlands aren't liking these new people in their house at all.
Of course not.
Well, they have this book for the recently deceased, which gets them in touch with their social worker, which introduces another interesting wrinkle of the movie. If you kill yourself, we learn, you become basically a government employee in the afterlife. Right. Your job basically is to help other people get through the experience of transition between life and afterlife. Another sort of interesting and dark wrinkle. And they are also introduced to this character who won't say his name, but says, if you say that name 3 times, I'll show up. And he calls himself a bioexorcist. And he can get rid of troublesome humans. He's like an exterminator of humans.
That's right.
This is, of course, Beetlejuice, played quite memorably by Michael Keaton.
Undeniably, yeah.
So they're told that they can try and haunt the place themselves, or they have the option to hire Beetlejuice or presumably someone else to do the job for them.
Well, yeah.
All of this sort of speaks to the level of imagination that has been put into this movie.
No kidding.
Sandworms in space and, suicidal government workers and...
well, your lead character is a self-proclaimed bioexorcist.
Yes.
Who works for ghost people in order to get rid of their human... I don't know, nuisances?
Exactly, like a human exterminator.
Well, yes.
It's also interesting that for some reason he lives in the model that Alec Baldwin's character has created of his small town. It seems like the Beetlejuice spirit has somehow been banished into this model for some reason. It's also interesting to me to see Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis playing the Maitlands. Alec Baldwin especially playing such like a milquetoast sort of character.
Oh, yeah.
He's not a badass. He's not gruff Alec Baldwin at all.
Not in the least.
You don't imagine that violence even occurs to this character at all. He's just a completely mellow fellow.
Yeah, no, he's a sensitive guy. I can see why Gina Davis ended up with him.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as such, because they're so nice, they're not very good at being ghosts.
No.
They don't know how to scare these people. No. They seem to forget that these people can't see them, so they do all these absurd things to themselves to try and scare them off.
Right, yes. Enter some of the claymation...
Absolutely. If I have complaints about Beetlejuice, and I have to look pretty hard to find them. If I'm honest, the ending of the movie doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense.
Not really.
But if I'm honest, I don't really care that it doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's this one's about the ride.
It is. You're not going to know what's around the next corner in this movie.
No.
You were talking about a memorable dance sequence in the movie.
Of course, yeah. Well, it's Hera Belafonte.
Yeah.
And they're sitting around their dining table, and Ortho's there trying to basically conduct an exorcism of the house.
Yes.
Getting rid of these ghosts, and instead becomes possessed by Michael Keaton's Beetlejuice.
The entire dinner party is basically does a song and dance routine in that one sequence to
the Banana Boat song.
The Banana Boat song.
Yes.
And to the horror of Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin, yes. So this does not scare them away. This, in fact, makes them more interested.
That's right.
They start courting investors. They start trying to find ways in. We have proof of the afterlife.
Absolutely.
And this gets exacerbated because Otho gets his hands on the book for the recently deceased.
Right. That's right. They lose their handbook to Otho.
They do sort of befriend and quickly bond with the Winona Ryder character.
The goth girl, really?
Yeah. Who is able to see them for some reason, because she herself is strange and unusual.
That's right.
She says. I've been going on and on. Please, what are your...
oh, gosh, what can I say? I mean, I think for me, Beetlejuice will always have a special place for me in the Tim Burton catalog. I think... in many ways, it reminds me of why I liked his movies in the first place. And largely because of the performances that he got from actors other than the ones that he uses every time now.
I do think it actually holds up quite well, both in the sort of visual standpoint and like it doesn't feel like a really 80s movies necessarily. I've seen it a lot of times, and I enjoyed watching it again for this. Like, I didn't... It wears well. It bears repeat viewing well, which I also think says something about it.
Well, yeah, that's a part of being a timeless movie, or being able to just exist in all the time slots, is that you don't marry yourself to one time or another. And it's not an 80s movie at all, but it's not an anytime movie. And I think, again, claymation actually gives you that leeway in some ways. As soon as you start using digital images, the quality changes time and time again. Claymation really hasn't changed at all, so...
And then there's the small town vibe, right? We got a small town vibe. It feels weirdly 50s just because of especially the Gina Davis and like I say, the Alec Baldwin characters.
Absolutely.
They could be living in Mayberry for all we
Most
know.
definitely.
And that adds sort of to a timeless quality of it. It's a lot of fun, and it's fairly light. I think it's also the least horror movie of all of these. There might be a couple of doom moments, and it does deal with ghosts in the afterlife, but it's a very soft touch, and it wants to charm you. It doesn't want to scare you.
Absolutely.
And it does charm you.
It does. It's fun to watch, and I think it's very accessible for a younger audience in that way too.
And we've got to give Michael Keaton his due here, too. Michael Keaton was like a super, super hot actor at this time. He was Batman, and for a while there he was just the movie star, the go-to movie star. But he also had the goods.
Yes.
I don't think this would be the same if, say, Johnny Depp played Beetlejuice. I really think that Michael Keaton really brought some sort of... his style and energy really added something to the movie.
Absolutely. This is a real high point for him, or for me, in terms of his movieography.
And as much as his name is the title of the movie, he is a supporting player. He's sort of a villain / supporting player.
Yeah.
There's a couple times where he actually directly refers to the audience. He also breaks the wall a little bit. Yeah. I don't know if that's a choice that I would have made, but it wasn't so distracting as to hurt the movie for me.
Yeah, well, it always had that sort of... the movie never had a sense of being grounded in any kind of reality anyway, so, I mean, if he wants to cheat to the audience on occasion, I suppose, why not? I mean, he's capable of communicating with both sides of the known world in this universe. I mean, he's sort of playing both sides of the fence in some ways. I think he knows how to get to the humans in the way that our ghost heroes can't. So,
and his energy sort of sort of helps fly over the softer edges of the script. Like, for some reason, he needs to get married to be unbanished, and the whole business, the somewhat sloppy but visually spectacular third act of the movie where the Maitlands are being exorcised, which is, as we have heard, death for the dead. If you get exorcised, then you're a lost soul, which is like bad news. Yeah. And the whole climax of the movie revolves around that. And then at some point, Gina Davis's ghost rides in on top of one of these worms and eats Beetlejuice. I don't know exactly what happened there. And it sort of worked against what we'd seen before, but like I said, this is not a movie that asks you to think too deeply about some of these things.
Well, yeah, no, it's best not to. I mean, that she could somehow bridge between the two worlds, the Mars world and the ghost world, and somehow break through into the human world from the Mars world. I mean,
either a reel of the film is missing, or we just need to let go and say that just happened. Let's roll with the punches. Yeah, this movie is funny and charming, and we do, and you should, and the movie earns it in a way that few subsequent Tim Burton movies will.
Regrettably, yes. I think it's a shame too, because I love the aesthetic that he brings, but it's gotten sort of, it's like a voice correcting on overproduced music now. Yeah. It's just
auto-tune.
Yeah, it's got a bit auto-tune now. It's sad. I'm sorry to say that, but that's true. Good for Danny Elfman to contribute his part here. I think it's anytime you can get somebody like that working on your movie, it makes a big difference.
And I think this movie's style was playing to his strengths, absolutely.
Of course it was. The dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun. Like, it's got that pace, it's got the same charm that he can easily underscore, so... yeah, he gets a shout out on that one.
This is the story of two young American students traveling through England on a night of the full moon.
Did you hear that? I heard that. What was it? Could be a lot of things.
Fate let one live.
That lunatic must have been a very fierce fellow.
Wasn't a lunatic.
What?
A wolf.
Oh, be serious, would you?
And now everything is changing. Changing.
Good Lord.
John Landis, the brilliant young director of Animal House and the Blues Brothers, has turned a classic tale of terror into something new. Something different.
Excuse me.
A naked American man stole my balloon.
Okay, in 1981, John Landis brought to the world An American Werewolf in London.
And no one saw this movie coming.
And apparently nobody wanted this movie. He had written this script when he was a much younger man, and it wasn't until he'd had a couple of assured box office successes that he was given permission to do this project.
Yeah.
And, say what you will about Animal House and say what you will about some of Landis's other earlier works.
Yeah.
I think The American Werewolf in London is the one that he's going to be remembered for.
Well,
at least as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no. It's like, as I was saying earlier, this is the granddaddy of the modern day werewolf movies. He had just come off Blues Brothers.
Blues Brothers, the other one I was trying to think of.
And Blues Brothers was not the big hit that
they'd hoped for.
I mean, it made some money, but it was not a home run.
That seemed to be Landis's curse. The movies aren't successful right away. They're successful, 3 or 4 years later on video. They slowly sort of get an audience. People don't line up for his movies for some reason.
Well, Animal House was a huge hit for him, but I agree with you. I think the only other film that at the time made a lot of money for him was both Trading Places and Coming to America, and that was more Eddie Murphy than it was John Landis.
At the time, there was no bigger star in the world.
Yeah.
Werewolf in London, unsurprisingly, has to do with a couple of American tourists, backpackers, headed through the I think they're in the moors. Are they in Wales? I can't exactly not sure where they are at the very beginning of the movie. But David Naughton and Griffin Dunne play these two guys.
Yeah.
We get maybe 5 or 10 minutes of them at the beginning of the movie, walking and talking.
Yeah.
And that's all the time that we need to like these guys, be on their side, completely relate to them.
Yeah.
And because it's called An American Werewolf in London, we're pretty sure that one of these guys is dead meat.
Well, we really know right from the beginning that they're dead meat. I mean, not subtle. We first meet them in a truck full of sheep.
They're in the back of a truck full of sheep, and then they walk through this misty landscape to an inn and a bar called what? The Slaughtered Lamb.
Yes.
It is not subtle, but it is fun, and it is funny.
Oh my god, this movie is funny.
I think it would be interesting if you were English to watch this movie, because you get the idea that they're not exactly making fun of English people, but they're making fun of how we perceive English people.
Yeah, no, this movie...
The people in the bar, the Slaughtered Lamb, are all very strange.
In a lot of ways, the British people did not come off quite well in this movie. They're either torn to pieces, or they're kind of dicks, with the exception of, what's her, Jenny
Agutter.
Jenny Agutter, who is unbelievably gorgeous in this movie.
She's attractive and she has an accent. It's almost unfair.
I know. It's just, wow.
But I thought it was interesting in the bar scene, and we're just at the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
The people are so off-put by having non-locals in their place. You're not local.
Yes.
That they want them to leave. They're made uncomfortable by their presence.
Yet they know
they want them to leave so much that they send them out into the moors in the dead of night, where they know for a fact that there's a werewolf on the hunt.
Yeah.
So why did they do this? And, the boys get ejected from the bar. They walk through the moors. They don't listen to any of their instructions, like dumb backpacking American kids probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
And they get attacked by a werewolf.
Yeah.
And the townspeople, and we didn't get this scene where they had the conversation in the bar afterwards. Maybe we shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
We never have that scene where they come to the realization. But they are good enough to come to their rescue after they put them in harm's way.
Yeah. What's interesting, one of the themes or underlying themes of American Werewolf in London is, foreigners.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of get the impression, especially when this movie was coming out, there had been riots in England about a lot of, to do with immigrants. And that's one of the themes in American Werewolf in London is, the foreigner coming into the merry old land of England, who, of course, was responsible for a lot of colonialism around the world, and how England treated a lot of immigrants. I cannot, but that's one thing that kind of stuck out with me as I've seen American Werewolf in London, I think now 6-7 times, and last night that was one thing that really struck out at me is how foreigners are really treated in this movie.
I didn't think that deeply about it, and I would argue I've probably seen it 16 or 17 times. This was a popular pick for me in my teenage years. But the movie has a sense of humor, and I do think that it is basically a fairly straightforward werewolf movie. I get the feeling like the humor and the sort of observations just sort of happen along the way.
Yeah.
But we're there for the werewolf movie.
Oh no, it is a classic take on the werewolf story. Landis has even admitted to that he wanted to make a traditional classic werewolf movie in a modern. Oh, I know it's an oxymoron, but a modern take on it, but it's still a classic werewolf movie.
So getting back to the plot as we're slowly unfolding it, our character of David, the one played by David Naughton, wakes up in a hospital and his friend has been killed.
Yeah.
And I remember, even at a young age when I first saw the movie, I was really bummed out that Griffin Dunne was dead because I liked him so much.
Yeah.
And this is another one of the brilliant gifts of the movie.
Yeah.
Just because Griffin Dunne's dead does not mean he's out of the movie. In fact,
hi there, David.
Exactly. He keeps on appearing to David, explaining to him what's happening.
Yeah.
And he's got a lot of bad news to level to his friend, but he's still the same guy. They're still friends.
Yeah.
The worst thing that could possibly happen to Griffin Dunne has already happened to him. Right? We see him in increasingly worse state of decay, but he seems to keep a pretty light measure about it. He almost seems to enjoy this horrible limbo world.
I don't know if he enjoys it, but he's trying to break the bad news gently to his friend because he knows that his best friend is going through some issues.
Yeah. But he almost wants to give him a high five for having sex with the nurse.
I think he
said
clearly
nurse.
does. Yeah. Right on.
Just because I'm dead doesn't mean we can't still be buddies. So I like that they're bond. He's broke death.
Yeah.
And I like the slow transformation we're getting with him. He starts having bizarre dreams.
Oh my god!
I will argue actually that the dream sequences might be for me the scariest parts of the movie.
They're pretty terrifying.
They're absurd and random and crazy. There's the bizarre addition of the Muppets. He has a dream where he's back home, and all of a sudden his family gets killed by these weird Nazi werewolf-looking things, and the kids are watching the Muppets on the screen. And then he wakes up, and an American has showed up at the hospital to help him through his troubles, and he's played by Frank Oz.
That's right.
Who is the puppeteer and the voice for most of people's favorite Muppets.
He is Kermit the Frog. He's the voice of Kermit.
Oh, Jim Henson was the voice of Kermit. But
he
did like Miss Piggy and I think Fozzie Bear and a lot of the big Muppets. But anyway, there's this weird little connection if you notice it.
Yeah. Little segue. You've seen Darkman, yes?
Yes, of course.
Do you remember the hospital sequence when Darkman is sort of latched? He's just been burnt. He's completely all white.
Right.
The nurse giving the doctor giving the speech about sticking the pen into Darkman is none other than Jenny Agutter.
Oh, really?
And one of the doctors whose face is covered is none other than John Landis.
Huh.
It is a big nod to American Werewolf in London.
Well, it's a very respected movie, and with good reason.
Yeah.
The thing the film is most famous for, which we have come to, is his transformation sequence. He can't quite believe he's a werewolf, and you kind of you believe it because he's alone a lot of the time.
Yeah.
All the time he's talking to Griffin Dunn, he's by himself, so he convinces himself that this is just survivor guilt.
Yeah.
He lived, his friend didn't. It's fucked him up.
Yeah.
So he's not a werewolf. He doesn't need to kill himself. He's not going to threaten the people of London.
Yeah.
Until, oh wait.
Yeah. Oops.
One of the many things I love about this transformation sequence, which they invented an Oscar to give to this movie. The special effects Oscar was made because this movie was made.
It was well earned.
Yeah, absolutely. The transformation, and I don't think I remember ever seeing this in a werewolf movie before, maybe a few times since, but never before, is incredibly painful to him.
My god, it is. You can hear the bones snapping and him screaming.
And David Naughton does a great job of it because when we see it, it all happens in probably a 3-minute sequence, maybe if that.
Yeah.
But this would have been several days and pieces of prosthetics. No CGI here, kids.
No.
And it is an amazing transformation, and they hold, they don't cut away from it. They give you long shots of it.
It's never been rivaled.
No.
It's never been beaten.
It is still the best transformation that I've ever seen.
Story goes, and if you get like a new copy of American Werewolf in London, either on DVD or Blu-ray, I recommend watching the documentaries on it. And it talks about how, and it's Rick Baker that did the special effects, if I'm not mistaken.
He was pilfered from The Howling for this.
Yes, he was. His understudy, guy who did the special effects for The Thing. Rob Bottin got the Howling job. Anyways, Baker and Landis were doing another movie before American Werewolf in London. And Landis came to Baker and said, I want to get this werewolf movie made. How would you do it? And Baker said, well, I would do, this, this, and this, and this. And Landis said, well, I just got the money for it. We're going to shoot it in just about 2 years from now, a year and a half. I'm giving you an extra 6 months to come up.
They gave him time.
And it clearly shows.
Yeah.
It is so good.
Yeah. The weird counterintuitive thing about this is where they don't pull any punches on the transformation.
Yeah.
They do pull a lot of punches on the kills.
They do.
I think a lot of the reason that I really liked this movie when I was especially young is because it was a horror movie that didn't overly scare me. I like to show my friends horror movies and make them think I was cool, but when I was younger, I was a little bit more of a scaredy cat.
Yeah.
And this movie didn't scare me because they cut away so much. They will set up the events leading to the attack, and we'll see a second.
Yeah.
And then they will cut away. And this happens several times in the movie.
Yeah.
We get to see the aftermath because as he kills more victims, more people end up in the limbo world.
Yeah.
So instead of just being visited by Griffin Dunn, he's getting an increasing cast of characters,
yeah.
most of which aren't as gentle with him because they're not his best friend.
Yeah. No, the real juice comes in the Piccadilly Square sequence at the end where, the werewolf is unleashed and is like biting people's heads off and running around, and we have that big sort of bus,
double-decker bus
that crashes and runs over that head and everything. That's when, that's shades of Blues Brothers right there with those insane car chases. Yeah, but I agree. The werewolf, the attacks cut away. It's the end and the first attack when
we get some.
What's David's best friend again?
Griffin's Dunn's name of the actor. I can't remember the name of the character, but
anyways, his death is quite brutal. Jack. When Jack is killed, he's ripped to shreds, and it is like not nice.
No, it's a brutal death.
Yeah, that is really the only really two scenes of violence, with the exception of that Nazi nightmare dream where throats are slit and people are shot. But oh my god, when it does happen.
Little touches that I want to mention too. All of the music in the film are songs about moons. You know, Bitter Moon, Blue Moon. Yeah. A couple of versions of Blue Moon.
Yeah.
Just
Bad Moon on the right.
Yeah. I see a bad moon arising.
Yeah.
And nice funny little touches too. But there's also touches that are real. We're almost at the end here, but I'm going to jump right back to the beginning when Griffin Dunn is being attacked.
Yeah.
One of my favorite moments of the film. Griffin Dunn bears the brunt of the attack.
Yeah.
So David runs.
Yes.
And I think anybody would run in that
course.
situation. But I love that he's running away and he's hearing his friend's screams, and the screams are getting farther away and quieter.
Yeah.
And he has to stop.
Yeah.
He has to go back and help his friend.
Yeah.
That whole scene was just so well handled, and of course your human instinct is to run away.
Yeah.
And he does run away, but instead of cutting away from that, he had that beat where he does will himself to go back, and so rarely do I see that done, and so rarely.
He's a really good guy.
Yeah.
Like, if we didn't like him before, we clearly like him after that, which makes his fall even more tragic. I know we have to end this conversation really quickly, but I'm going to say, besides the Piccadilly Square sequence, which is my favorite in the film, that it starts off in a porno theater, no less.
I love the porn movie they're watching. It's so funny.
Yes, it is. The scene where he wakes up in the zoo and he then runs and he steals that kid's red balloons.
A naked American man stole my balloon.
See, that's why I love this movie.
Perfection. A scorched outpost in the middle of nowhere.
You know how close I am to leaving this place right now? How close?
Maybe that's why Val and Earl decided to leave town.
Hey, hold up. That's Edgar Deans.
They just picked the wrong day to do it.
Jeez. You guys better get the hell out of here. There's a killer on the loose.
Who could be doing it?
Is that a snake?
I'll give you boys $5 for this. 20.
That's how they get you. They're under the ground.
What the hell are those things? How could they eat a whole station wagon?
But where do they come from? I vote for outer space.
The year is 1990. And I keep on seeing commercials on TV for this movie starring Kevin Bacon called Tremors. And I'm begging my dad that I want to go see it. But I'm right on the cusp between that age group where I still need my dad to go with me, even though I'm too old to go to the movie with my dad. But I wanted to see it in the big screen because, to me, Tremors looked awesome. I just had a good feeling about it when I heard of it. And my daddy took me to see this movie. And I fucking loved it in 1990. And I fucking love it in 2015. I absolutely adore Tremors. Maybe more than it deserves in some respects. But for me, this is highly personal. I love the shit. I love the shit out of Tremors. The tone of it, like the balance between legitimate stakes and adventure of these crazy underground creatures, and this really light, jovial sense of humor, shouldn't work as well as it does.
The feels are coming off you pretty hard right now.
But it works really, really well. And I could not have ever predicted that the meshing of Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward would be such a potent thing, but they are
talk about
awesome.
bromance.
Like, they're awesome. We have
their timing; they play so well off each other. Yeah.
We have Val and Earl. They're basically these handymen that work in this tiny little desert community that is cut off between a valley and some mountains, and has conveniently only one road of access.
Yeah, there's rock and hard place.
Yeah. So we get introduced in the first half of the movie to all the colorful characters in the town, including, most famously for this movie, Michael Gross, who was at that time playing against type for from Family Ties, and Reba McEntire making her big screen debut.
It's funny, he had actually just filmed the last episode of Family Ties before starting this.
Yeah.
For like a couple days or something, so that's an interesting switch.
But
and Reba McEntire demanded to be in this movie. She actually asked for it. So
nice.
I was just like, yeah, that's an excellent way to start your acting career, and I wish I had that power.
But the patriarch of the Keaton family from Family Ties was like the nicest, mellowest, like, you know, gentle ex-hippie that you're ever going to imagine. And in this movie, he
has an elephant gun.
Yeah.
I love
but
that.
He has a ridiculous arsenal in his basement. But they're that rare quality. They're like lovable rednecks.
I wanted to be her growing up, like that. Oh, their guns and all this. I just thought that was so cool. They're survivalists, right?
Yeah.
And I really love that attitude. But I mean, they kind of all are. I mean, like, it's a small town. There's 14 people, I think, is what they say.
Everybody knows everybody, and
everybody knows each other's business.
Yeah, and we get introduced to that world really quickly, and we love Val and Earl. They have great banter to each other, and we're introduced to this student who's very conveniently to the plot studying seismology. She's played by this actress Finn Carter. I remember thinking that she was just so awesome in this movie and so charming, and I really got her as like a romantic lead, and I have seen her in nothing since. I looked up her credits. She has done TV and stuff, but Finn Carter, I missed you. Where did you go, sweetheart?
She was so good in that, too. I mean, like, she played the smart and the cute sort of ingenue nicely. And what's really interesting is about, like, the small cast. Again, small cast.
Yeah.
Desolate, sort of isolated situation. It almost played out like a play for me. And maybe it's just the theater experience rearing its head. But I was like, this would be interesting to sort of transfer to a play stage. Because of, like, just how like how you said, you're introduced to these two lovable rogues. Played by, Fred Ward and Bon Jovi stunt double.
Again, you would never think that those two actors would have such chemistry together, but they nail it. Not since Moose and Squirrel has been so surprised by a comedic duo.
I bet their hands were chapped from all the high fives they were giving each other. High fives.
The basic premise of the monster that we're talking about is a land shark, essentially.
That was the premise, yeah.
These creatures can travel under the dirt as fast as a shark can swim in water. They spit these tentacles out of their mouths. They grab hold of you, bite onto you, and suck you into the ground so you can be devoured alive. Mm-hmm. Good times. I dedicated an entire episode to sharks. I think my fear and love of sharks has been made clear. The first time I saw
Should
Jaws...
I stop sending you shark pictures?
The first time I saw Jaws, I remember walking home and I was scared. I was
terrified of my dad's pool growing up because I was like, that filter, is that a shark filtering filter?
But I was scared walking home in the middle of the Alberta prairies. The shark was going to fall out of the sky or jump out of the lawn.
Sharknado.
And Tremors.
And now that's a reality.
Tremors realized that, though. That's essentially what they did. You have to stay off of the ground. The floor is lava. Right?
It's interesting because that was actually, I believe, the premise that the guy, he was like, out somewhere sitting on a rock and like, what would happen if something just reached out and grabbed me? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a base terror that we have, like, in our beds. If my toe is out, something's gonna get that toe. Like, we're talking caveman instinct of, I'm gonna get eaten by a thing. That's it's terrifying. But yeah, they played it out so well. I mean, they had a really nice logical explanation for it. I think they're Devonian creature sauruses,
Well, that's one of the great things about this movie. I know that Tremors isn't the first to do it, but I always sort of apply this as that this is the Tremors rule. Mm-hmm. If your premise is blatantly preposterous and ridiculous...
Mm-hmm. I love the ludicrous nature of it, though.
Don't try to explain it. There is one scene where a bunch of the townspeople are sort of positing what they think these things might be and why they've suddenly just shown up out of the blue.
But why does it matter?
But at no point did they conclusively tell us. And you know what? First of all, why waste the time on that? And secondly, what explanation would we accept? Right? Because we're thrown into it with the characters, we have no choice, like the characters do, but to go with it. We don't know why there's suddenly these huge underground creatures eating you, but you better do something about it, because they're going to fucking eat you.
Is figuring it out gonna save you? You know, like it's
focus on what's important here.
Well, it's interesting that you sort of make that comment about, like, there's the lack of exposition, and I kind of thought that they were sort of like, oh, it's probably an old thing that's been around. Done. Yeah. That's it. Like, that's all we need to know. Quentin Tarantino has done it in some of his films where he just chops out giant parts of exposition because he realizes that they're not needed.
Yeah. If someone asks me why something is so, I can tell them, but does it need to be in the movie, right?
It's obviously aliens, you know, in a lot of these movies. That is logic. That is, like, the actual reason. And I like that because you're supposed to have, like, this element of fantasy. And especially when it comes to things like terror. Why is it terrifying? Because it is. It's a terrifying thing, you know. You can't reason with it either. I mean, and I think that it's coming at you. It's coming at you. That's
big points to the screenplay. They definitely seem to know. Well, like I talk about the balance of the comedy and the horror, but like
I love black humor though, and I think that they could die, but you know they're like.
They set up things. This whole stampede thing that is threaded throughout the movie that works into the climax of the movie. I never felt like they were leading up to something. They were setting this up. But they clearly were. It was clearly implanted in the screenplay. As dumb as all the characters are, in a way, there's a lot of smart stuff in the screenplay. And I think the button scene that, for me, sort of nails down the brilliance of the movie, in the way I talked about the blood scene and the thing sort of boxes in the greatness of that movie in one scene. There's a scene where they've been given horses to try and get out of town, and as they're riding away, the horse gets attacked that they're riding, gets attacked by the snake, and they realize that's why we haven't seen the creature. It's under the ground. It's made real. And having lost their mounts, they have no choice but to run. And out of sheer desperation, they run towards a culvert and try to jump across it. And out of complete luck, not skill, complete luck, they found a way to deal with the creature. Because the creature, although it could dig it like crazy through the wood, once it hit that concrete embankment at top speed, smashed itself dead. I remember watching this in the theater, and when Kevin Bacon turned around and he looked and he saw the blood pouring out of the concrete and that limp head sort of flopped down on the ground and all that slime.
Gross.
And he points at it and he screams and he says, "Fuck you!" I swear to God, I was almost on my feet in the theater. I was so in love with that movie at that point.
That's the only swear in the film, too. That's the only F word.
Yeah, they can get away with one. You're allowed one, right? But it was...
That's one.
It was wonderful, and, like, it was scary, and it was hilarious simultaneously.
It was relieving.
Right?
It was relieving, yeah. And you totally were with them on that. And I think that's why I like when the survivalists there, you got your Michael Gross and your Reba McEntire, and they're just like, let's deal with this, you know, like that attitude. We're going to do what we can with what we have.
That's a microcosm of what we talked about in Predator, too. They are people who believe there's no situation they can't handle, right? And they're set up as badass. And it's
surprisingly positive.
Yeah, they come back from, you know, doing their search for the creatures, completely befuddled that they can't find any evidence. They know something's killing people. And they've got their weapons, and they get a call from town, and Reba looks out the window, and she sees that everybody in town is on the roof of their house, and she's like, dude, something is up.
And they have their cartridge polisher going, and the shots that cut to it are, again, this is where it comes, like, down to suspense for me.
They're doing everything wrong,
and
they
it's
don't know it.
It's beautiful, because, like, it has this sort of, like, close-up of the cartridge shaking, and this is when you figured out that, like, it's the noises and the vibrations, and that's what they're trying to, like, get on the roof, they go to sound, and they're like, what? I can't hear, oh, that was so well done. But the further
brilliance of that sequence is, in any other horror movie, that's the scene where the Gummers get killed, right?
Yeah.
They cut, the creature breaks through the wall.
Like their name is almost Gunners. Like that.
The creature breaks through the wall. They cut to everybody in town looking really, like, crushed. And you hear in the distance, crack of all these gunfires. And you're expecting that the gunfire will stop and that will be it. But no, they cut back into the rec room, and the two guys have, like, the survivalists have a wall full of guns, and they proceed to blow the shit out of this creature.
I have such ladywood for that scene, because it was just... They were prepared,
triumphant from it. And like I say, in any other movie, those two people died. That was their last scene, right? But no, they're an asset to the group.
Yeah, Keaton's rule. I agree with that, because what I like about it is it shows their determination. Like, they're survivalists; they're prepared for the worst.
Yeah.
And then the worst happens. They're like, "Well, buckle up." Like, that's the whole attitude.
There's that wonderful line he has when they're actually leaving the town. He's like, "We got water and dry food for 3 years. Geographic isolation, weapons and firepower to hold off an entire battalion. And what are we set against? Underground goddamn monster." It's just like, it's not fair.
Oh yeah, no, I thought that was so cool, because I mean, again, like you're saying, land sharks, right? Or as I like to call them, the sand penis. But I mean, it's such an absurd premise, and they made it work. I mean, it was so successful, like we were talking, like 5 movies or something, and yes, this is the best. I mean, the originals to me are pretty much always the best, but. I mean, it became iconic. It's well, I mean, Dune even has, like, the sandworms, right? You know, sort of thing. I mean, like, it's something that we're terrified of it. It doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
And we're so terrified of it that it's shown up in other things. Like, it's shown up in the science fiction genre, and it's shown up, well, I guess this is kind of science fiction-y, but it's like action, adventure, western. This is basically a western. With a sand stuff.
Everything's in the stew here. It's funny, it's scary, it's got, monster movie effects. One of the last great sort of monster movies before CGI took over everything. Yeah. There is a little bit of CGI in the movie when you see it drifting over in the sand here and there, but the actual creature itself is something made physically by artists and puppeteers.
I so respect that, and I really miss that about just how we've moved to CGI, and yes, it's gotten better and stuff. I mean, like I said, The Host, I thought that was quite well done, but for this, the building of the props and stuff, like how real it looked.
Giving the actors something to work with other than, what am I looking at here? Let's pretend
it's a ball and a stick, it's trying to eat you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just the fact that, like, when they're unearthing it, how real it looked. It had that heft to it. And when they crack that thing open and they're like, oh, the smell, like you could practically smell it yourself. Like, the realism was there. And I mean, like, as somebody that's always loved special effects work, and wondering how they made it, that was never really a question for me. It was almost like, they just went out and they got a sandworm. Like, that's what it looked like. It looked so real. And, like, the gore and the grossness to it. And, like, even, like, the armored head. Like, it was so thought out. It was very well thought out and very well put together. It was a tangible bad guy.
One little fun fact here, and before we move on, we should probably move on soon, but Ariana Richards is in this movie. She's a little blonde girl on a pogo stick. Right. She's always bouncing up and down on the concrete, and as we've learned, that's like ringing the dinner bell for it. But interestingly, 3 years later from this, she would be defending herself from dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. Sort of feels like that Tremors was her little, like, training ground to prepare her. She was going to spend lots of time working with creature species.
Running away from
but a very effective child actress. When she was scared, I believed her. And,
for sure.
I loved everybody in this movie. Victor Wong, we didn't really mention him. He's Walter who runs the convenience store.
Who named them graboids.
Yeah.
Because it's, again, absurd premise and stuff like that. So what name? And that's what they call them. It became, like, it's called a graboid.
But he's a weirdly stereotypical character in a way. Like, he's like this, he's like a Chinese store owner, and he's sort of like
Vietnamese.
Always got a Vietnamese store owner, pardon me, who is always playing an angle, and in a way he's sort of like one of these irritating characters, and yet when it erupts from the floor and grabs him, you're like, no, not Walter. Right?
Well, I mean, he made it a meaty character. Yeah. I think it was very much kind of one dimensional. It's like, the Oriental storekeeper or whatever.
That's what I was going for.
But yeah, he absolutely, I think he made you care about him because even when he's like trying to nickel and dime them, throughout the beginning when it's sort of setting up who his character is, they care about him and he cares about them, and so I think that's why there was an emotional impact when he died. So.
It's a smart, funny, scary, exciting creature feature. I mean, I don't know what more you want.
5 out of 5 sandworms.
Marry someone, you promise to love them forever.
Baby.
No matter how much they might change.
Try it. Baby, what happened to your face?
It's just a beef steak.
From Universal Pictures
Tree is sick or something?
comes a film so shocking.
We got a real problem here.
So disgusting.
Don't let him in your mouth!
It will change the face of horror.
Marriage is a sacred bond, for better or worse.
Much worse.
I'm a big fan of James Gunn.
Yes.
He's the director of the movie we're going to talk about here, Slither. He also has this really bizarre movie called Super, starring Rainn Wilson as a dude who decides to become a superhero after he is touched by God. I recommend you checking it out. It's not a movie for everybody, but it is definitely a movie for you and I.
Yeah, okay.
But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about Slither. This movie stars Nathan Fillion. Free me. Star of Firefly and Serenity, and now
Castle.
An Edmonton-born boy.
Really?
He and I used to shop at the same comic book store.
Huh.
Never met the man, but we did shop at the same comic book store. I heard him interviewed, and he was talking about Edmonton and the Wee Book Inn, and I was like, "Oh, that's so awesome!" Anyway, he plays the sheriff of a small town that gets a visitation from outer space in the form of a weird slug creature that infects a character played by Michael Rooker. And it sets about making some babies and spreading a plague, a very bizarre plague. It includes great variety of things. We got wormy slugs.
Yeah.
We got sort of possessed zombie-like people. We've got a giant morphing squid monster.
Yeah. Sort of the mother-father figure.
Yeah. And then we've got the cast of kooky characters in this small sort of hunting town.
Yeah.
This is a fun B-movie sort of vibe, but very modern. And it was a huge bomb at the box office.
It was, which, I mean, I have to admit, like, when I first saw the commercials, I was like, I have no interest in seeing that. That was stupid. But, you know, it's one of those movies, I'm like, as soon as I picked it up on DVD, I've watched this movie, I don't know how many times, and I highly recommend it to people.
Well, Gunn got the gig because he wrote the remake to Dawn of the Dead. So this was the script that he had next, and he wanted to direct it. And I think in an ideal world, it would have been a monster hit. People keep on asking, you know, where's our generation's John Carpenter, who does just silly, fun, awesome you know, popcorn entertainment.
Well, the thing was scary.
The thing was scary. But I mean, you know.
But Escape from LA, really.
For the most part, he'll do straight up horror movies. But Carpenter, I think his bread and butter is sort of fun, romp, silly kind of movies that I enjoy. And I think James Gunn has potential to be that. And I wish that his movies did better than they did. Both Super and Slither were kind of fairly not a lot of ripples made in the water, but. I am a big fan of Slither. Again, it's going to borrow from other genres. It borrows a little bit from the Body Snatchers.
Yeah.
You know, it borrows the sort of slug thing. Really reminds me of an '80s classic called Night of the Creeps.
Yeah.
You know, the small town being invaded by alien thing has been done so many times.
Wow.
But I don't think ever this gross, and I don't think ever this funny.
Well, and like just the mind-altering slug. You know, we have, you know, Khan! Like, when they, you know, they put it in the air and things like that in Star Trek. But, like, yeah, this movie was fun. It was an awesome cast. Yeah. Had my homeboy, you know, Dustin Milligan in one scene. Yeah! Canada! Yellowknife, though. Hey, it's awesome. The kid from, like, Yellowknife just, like, makes it up in their big leagues.
Was it Yellowknife? I thought
No.
Close enough.
Close enough. He's still our boy. But, like... Was it? And they said that like they used up like the national supply of like what was it, like slime or like some sort of like this like prosthetic.
No, I believe it.
And like it was just, I mean, it was fun. It was, you know, it was clever. Michael Rooker was a champ. You could tell that he, you know,
spent a lot of time in the makeup chair.
A lot of time in the makeup chair. And, like, it was one of those movies where, like, out of the list of movies where I'd say, like, there's a lot of movies that maybe I thought was, like, you know, the best movie. Yeah. The one that I would probably, like, one of the ones that I would probably uniformly, like, give to people and say, like, you'll like this movie. Yeah. I feel like this has a wider audience than a lot of the movies we're going to review today.
Absolutely. It's not going to be at the top of the list for me,
for sure.
But it is very good at being what it is, which is a horror comedy. Yeah. I mean, the parts that are funny are really funny, and the parts that are scary are quite scary. Things work. There's also great, bizarre moments in the movie. There's a zombie deer attack that happens at one point. The squid monster, they take to calling it the squid monster, and they have pictures of squids on the map everywhere.
Little tiny cartoons sticking out like squids on the map.
Absolutely. There's just lots of little bizarre moments. And we have a similar sort of unrequited love relationship between Nathan Fillion and Elizabeth Banks. She's married to Michael Rooker, a man much older and gruffer than she. And Nathan Fillion wishes she was not, and wants to play the hero to her. Elizabeth Banks has an interesting role in this movie in that she is asked to try to romance this repulsive, throbbing, alien, mushy thing.
And she did a good job. In my mind, this actually might be my favorite Elizabeth Banks performance.
she's pretty strong in it, you know.
Yeah. And, like, I mean, having to, you know, take that seriously. You know, you walk on a set and you see Michael Rooker in a big Jabba the Hutt looking prosthetic or something, and you know, and puppeteers working like tentacles around her and stuff as she's like has to deliver this really dramatic scene. Tough
and committed.
Tough challenge. 100% commitment.
I was talking about how the movie goes places you don't expect. The first woman who gets infected by Michael Rooker to create the little worms, which go on to infect the entire town, she gets impregnated and put in a barn and is being fed raw meat for the first half an hour or so of the movie. And when they find her, she is swollen so cartoonishly huge, she barely fits in the barn.
She's an orb. She's the Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, like, you know, girl who turns into a blueberry.
This is one of the most cartoonish things I've ever seen in a real movie. Yeah. And yet, in the world of this movie,
I buy it.
Completely accept.
There's no question.
Anything can happen at any time in this movie, and I love that about it. You know, we're going to have a good laugh at the, you know, shit-kicking mayor being a goofball in the one scene, and in the next scene, we're going to watch an entire family get fucking killed.
Just horribly. And, one of my favorite parts was when the one ranch family gets all infected and the one daughter runs behind Nathan Fillion, right? And, like, wants protection. It's like, you know, and they all look like these infected zombies. They just don't look well. And he's like, you know, what, you know, he's like, what's wrong? He's like, would you believe poison ivy? And the two daughters simultaneous, we're itchy.
That's right.
It's a funny line, and
it's creepy.
It's creepy and hilarious, and that was what I loved about it. And even the deer, the deer possession, and it had this very cartoony Muppet feel to it. But I was sold on it throughout the entire movie. There wasn't a moment where I was like, okay, that's just fucking silly.
Stop that. That's silly. The movie's just fun. I think that the thing I would most compare this to as far as the level of fun and gore and scares is a classic early 90s monster movie called Tremors. Where, you know, the movie wants to be fun and relatively light, even though there's going to be a body count. But they somehow ride this razor blade thing where they manage to be stupid and serious and funny and scary. And I think that done really, really well is rare, which is why it's such a sin that Slither didn't get the audience it deserved when it was released. I was counting down the days for this to be on DVD. It's one of the few movies that I paid full price for because I just was like, I was so in love with how goofy and, you know, dark and funny. I mean, yeah, I guess you say this will please the most amount of people, but I do also understand it has this weird edginess to it as well. I find in a lot of weird indie Canadian movies will have these scenes that go just a step or two farther than maybe they should.
They should have, yeah.
There's something of that vibe in Slither too.
Yeah.
But they never tip their hands so much as that. They never quite directly wink and look at their audience, but they come as close as they
close
can.
to it. Well, I mean, that's the other thing too. It's like, I don't know, Firefly had some of that weird, wacky humor too. That it was that sort of fun Joss Whedon sort of situation. But I had the exact same reaction to Slither when it was first coming out, and I saw the advertisements as I did for Cabin in the Woods, which is another one of my all-time favorite movies now. It looks terrible and cheesy. And then as soon as I get anchored down to watch it. And normally I feel like I'm a very good judge of movies based on the trailers and what I've seen, but these were two movies that came out of nowhere for me and were fantastic. I loved Slither.
Yeah, and on the strength of his, writing the remake of Dawn of the Dead and Slither, I will watch.
I'll watch anything else he makes. Yeah,
and I'm a fan of Super. Like I say, I'm in the minority. I think in a lot of ways that movie's just a little too weird for your normal everyday mom and pop audience.
Yeah.
But his next up is a Marvel superhero movie called Guardians of the Galaxy. It's a weird choice. I think they might be doing some of the more obscure, bizarre picks too soon in the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm going to go see it.
Yeah.
Home to over 6 billion people. Today, our very existence is threatened by epidemics, climate change, and dwindling resources. But those are the least of our problems. Welcome to Zombieland.
No, that was it. We're rolling.
Okay. Next on the list is Zombieland. This movie I saw in the theaters and loved it. It's a great movie to see in the theaters because it's just color and action and style and flair and all that's good in a movie.
I'm going to be saying mostly positive things about this movie, Zombieland, in its entirety. But the first 5 to 10 minutes of the movie, with the opening sequence and that credit sequence, is really something special to behold. There's like a lot of 3D zombie death being dealt, and it still feels light and fun, as well as being horrendously violent. It's a real hard balance to find, and they somehow found it right out of the gate.
Exactly. That's in fact, in some ways, that made the movie harder for me to review and analyze critically. Is that the the opening credits and the introductory scenes, just bam, right out of the gate. You're just completely enthralled, and they're genius. The opening credit sequence is funnier than some full movies.
It's true.
It's just
you got your money's worth right away. It reminded me actually of when, obviously, I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan. We just talked about Peter Jackson, but we went to see the second Lord of the Rings movie, and that opening sequence with the Balrog and Gandalf falling down the hole. I was like, okay, I'm 5 minutes into this movie, and I feel like I've got my money's worth. That's how I felt after the opening sequence of Zombieland.
Seriously.
I am 5 minutes into this movie, and I have got my money's worth.
They could just roll the credits and just a purple prose, just take that out, show it anywhere, and you'd win an Oscar. It's just really great. But then we get into the story. It's a story of
Jesse Eisenberg. Is that his name?
Jesse
Eisenberg.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Of course,
Yeah,
he's coming up in Hollywood right now.
He is. Yeah, but yeah. Well, I suppose the Facebook movie might have
Social Network
might have increased his. But yeah, he's always been good. I mean, he's always been this young actor. I mean, in Squid and the Whale, Noah Baumbach, and he's just playing small, quiet roles. Some people call him the poor man's Michael Cera, but no, he's got more. He's a different actor.
It's an interesting movie called Roger Dodger with him and
Yes.
Campbell Scott. I like him, but I do think that to a large extent he's one of these actors who he's playing Jesse Eisenberg in every role. I don't really see him disappearing into a part, but he does his Jesse Eisenberg thing well enough that I have no complaints.
Yeah. And he's our narrator for this movie. In some ways, this is a zombie survival guide, and you just know that there are people out there who are studying this movie just in case. I mean, he gives advice on how to survive a zombie apocalypse, and it's
practical advice.
Good practical advice, exactly.
I mean, I think the only one that I had any kind of real beef with was Beware Bathrooms. That's, I think, his own phobias coming through. But I also like the way they did that sort of pop-up video style, that whenever he would mention one of his rules, we would see text pop up on screen, and it's like, for anybody at home taking notes, nobody's given real names. They're basically given the name of the place they come from. But Jesse Eisenberg ends up meeting up with Woody Harrelson. And I'm going to say that Woody Harrelson in this movie may have found the funnest role of his career. And arguably, like, if you could play any role in any movie, like, it would be a hard one for me. Like, Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark, or the Woody Harrelson character in Zombieland. Like, as far as level of sheer enjoyment being and executing the film, like, that would be a blast of a part to have. And, Woody Harrelson plays it very straight, but I have to believe he was having a good time while he did it. It didn't feel like a paycheck performance to me.
Yeah, and
Tallahassee.
That's the man. Yeah, and just a cool man. So Columbus meets up with Tallahassee. I love that showdown. I love that standoff between the two characters first meet. It's just, I mean, and the whole well, I shouldn't say the whole movie plays real. I guess it does. Like, you believe the characters.
It's
the characters
real enough for the world that they're showing us.
Exactly.
It's not the real world, but it's the world of Zombieland, and we buy it enough.
Yeah, and then I meet up with these two, Emma Stone and Abigail Breslin, and
Abigail Breslin, of course, our Little Miss Sunshine, and Emma Stone, the wet dream of every young adult male in the world right now. Yeah. So. It's interesting, the female characters, and if there's a problem with the movie, and I am saying it's with those two girls, I think. Because for the first half of the movie, they are smart, they are resourceful, they completely, run circles around the guys as far as survival skills and as far as getting things. And in the second half of the movie, they suddenly
get in trouble,
are really, really dumb, and need to get rescued.
Yeah,
and that's a very abrupt shift in their characters, and it's done for no other reason than we need a big climax.
Yeah.
And I would be really mad about that if not for the fact that the climax is so fucking awesome. It doesn't make sense, but the girls want to go to this amusement park. And it was clearly supposed to be Disneyland, right?
Yeah.
But they couldn't get the rights to say Disneyland. So it's whatever it was called in the movie.
I don't know if Walt would really have approved of this movie.
Yeah, I don't think Walt would give it his thumbs up. But yeah, towards the end of the movie, they decide to go to this park. They turn on all of the rides, and they're riding around by themselves. They don't bring the guys with them. They're completely solo, and they attract thousands of zombies to them.
Good for us.
Good for the movie, good for a climax, but as far as, characters doing things that make sense.
Yeah, they just kind of go in there without a thought, really.
Nope.
They just kind of go, hey, we're going to go ride the rides.
Yeah. Now, I think part of the problem, if that's a problem, is that this was originally proposed as a pilot for a TV show, right? So my guess is originally the script was an hour long, and we got to meet all of our characters, right? Mm-hmm. So now we know who everybody is. They've had their first adventure together. Now let's go on to the ongoing adventures of Zombieland. So if next week there was another adventure, maybe we would have, it wouldn't have stood out so glaringly. But for me, my one real beef with Zombieland is that, people get stupid in the third act. Mm. But I mean, come on, the movie is so much fun. And it has the best cameo.
It really does.
In film history.
Yeah.
If somebody can tell me that there's a better cameo in a movie than this, I don't know if it quite qualifies as a cameo. It's certainly more than a one-scene role. He's maybe here for 5 minutes in the movie, but damn. When I saw it in the theaters, it was a surprise, but I have to believe at this point everybody knows that Bill Murray shows up in this movie.
Yeah, I think so.
I do put a spoiler warning at the top of the show.
Larry.
Whoa.
Some people don't know, but yes, it's a complete surprise.
I think it's appropriate to mention the Bill Murray cameo because they pay direct homage to a movie we're going to discuss in a little while here.
Oh, yes.
They actually reenact bits of Ghostbusters during the movie Zombieland. And Bill Murray gets big laughs out of me just being a guy standing there doing not much, just being himself.
Just being himself.
Yeah, Bill Murray as Bill Murray. I mean, come on, people. And yeah, what a lucky guy are you that you got 2 movies out of your picks that have the Bill in them.
Cool.
I'm sorry, I feel like I'm taking over the review. What are you guys?
Well, I'm not really sure what more to say about this. In some ways, we were talking about plot synopsis. In some ways, this might be where that falls apart. I mean, you've sort of got the introduction of the characters. You're going through this world. I wouldn't say it loses steam because it's always an entertaining movie.
Yeah.
But is it as far as a horror goes, in some ways it gets a little bit road trippy for a while, and you don't get that danger or fear.
Yeah. Nobody has a real destination. The girls did want to get to that play park. They did want to get to the amusement center, but really, there's just a group of people that found each other and eventually decide that they need to get along and work together to stay alive. But no, really, the strongest arc of the movie is Woody Harrelson's character's quest to get a Twinkie. Yeah. There's not a lot of driving one scene to the next. They're not on the heels the whole movie. The zombies sort of show up when needed and disappear when they're not.
Yeah.
But again, the goal this movie sets is to keep a smile on your face and to bring the red and to be a fun, funny zombie movie. And in that count, I think it is very successful.
A small American town, 15 years ago.
Michael? I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
John Carpenter's Halloween. Yes. John Carpenter had done a couple of films before this, and they were significantly successful. Dark Star was a student film they did with Dan O'Bannon, the guy who would later bring us Return of the Living Dead.
Hmm.
And the student film was considered such a success that they actually poured more money into it, add 15, 20 minutes and release it as a theatrical film. And shortly before Halloween came out, Carpenter had released a film called Assault on Precinct 13, which is actually, it's dated, but it's a fairly decent, action movie for its time. So next on the roster, he comes up with Halloween. Basically, the package in order to get the movie made, he basically agreed that he was going to do a movie on the subject of Halloween that involved babysitters and that was under, I think, $1 million, or maybe even less than that.
I think
like 800,000.
I think it cost 300,000.
Was it 300?
So,
it was appalling. Oh yeah, that's right. Because he lowballed the offer. He said, "I can do it for 250," but they ended up spending $3 or whatever. But the point is, it was a very small budget film.
Price of a couple cameras
and when he signed to do the film, he didn't have a script. He had Halloween and babysitters were the essential elements.
Action!
And go make your movie. Here's your check. Go make your movie. And Carpenter brought us Halloween. There's lots of connections that you can talk about between Halloween and the previous films. Most obviously, Jamie Lee Curtis is Janet Leigh's daughter. Janet Leigh was killed in the shower in Psycho.
Coincidence?
Yes. The faceless mask that they give Mike Myers, the killer, to wear in this film, which was actually, trivia hounds out there, a William Shatner mask.
Who was also Star Trek was Gunnar Hansen's favorite TV show.
Oh my God!
I'm kidding. I made that up.
But there's something about that, the fact that it's like a wash mask, just a plain white mask. It's not a visage of flesh like Leatherface, but it's almost a blank slate. Instead of going for sort of this weird psychological or psychosexual, there is echoes of, homosexuality being scary and bad that you could argue were implanted within Psycho and Texas Chainsaw Massacre anyway. But in this case,
you're not bringing that here, are you?
Yeah. In this case, what we have is a blank slate. In fact, they didn't refer to him as Michael Myers. The popular culture embraced Michael Myers. John Carpenter always wanted this killer to be known as the Shape.
Well, they call him Michael Myers in the movie.
Yeah.
He's doctor and...
Yeah, no, that's his name. But the idea, I think that the thing that they're trying to sell is that he was born, this kid named Michael Myers, but he's the Shape.
Okay.
He's this force of evil.
That's what he's credited in the credits, right?
Yeah. He's this force of evil, and I think even if you could sit down and have a conversation with Michael Myers, he wouldn't be able to tell you why he was evil. There isn't a reason necessarily why he's evil. For some reason, this little boy, one day, just snaps and becomes the embodiment of all things awful.
Whereas Psycho, we had a whole explanation at the end. What happened? Why is he the way he is? This, we're given no explanation, and it's a story about a sweet little boy who
kills his sister one night.
He puts on his clown outfit. Well, I don't know. Why does he kill his sister? Maybe he's wearing his clown outfit. Maybe he wants to go trick-or-treating, but his sister decided to blow her boyfriend instead. So, I don't know. Maybe there's no reason. But so he goes upstairs. We get the killer point of view with the mask on, which was kind of something new. I think that was new at that point.
It had been done before. I've talked about in Black Christmas, the point of view of the killer is exclusive almost to that movie. It predates Halloween, but it does a lot of the things Halloween did beforehand. I'm not going to accuse Carpenter of stealing. I honestly don't think that he was. Black Christmas has sort of been discovered later on.
Yeah.
But at the time, he was just, he was trying to please his producers. They wanted a Halloween-themed movie about babysitters, and he was going to deliver the goods.
And so he goes upstairs, watches his naked sister brush her hair for a little while, which, we've all done that, right?
We've all been there.
and then stabs the hell out of her. The moment I like is when he goes downstairs then, and he's standing on the sidewalk with a bloody knife. His parents conveniently show up right at that moment and pull off the mask and say, "Michael?"
Yeah.
And then that's all. And then the camera pans away, and they just stand there looking rather disappointed with it, but nothing really much else. And you tell me, it feels like about a span of 20-25 seconds where they're just
staring,
just looking at him and, "What did you do now, Michael?"
Oh, you. But a lot of things, whether or not they were first to it, a lot of things that you see in Halloween are things that will have reverberations for future slasher formula pictures. We have the virtuous, sort of pure, innocent, female protagonist who is not as sexually active as her friends, doesn't smoke weed like her friends does.
Although she did smoke weed.
She does smoke a little bit of weed in the car. That is true.
That's right.
There's a bit of the sin factor, but you
She
get the
doesn't seem
feeling
like she feels good about it.
she's less. She's not about that. Her whole life isn't about getting laid or being naughty.
She's got a secret crush on Ben Tramer.
Yeah.
I don't know why I always remember that name.
Because you want to be
I'll
Ben
be on my
Tramer so bad.
on my deathbed and I'll be Ben Tramer. No, I did not want to be Ben Tramer. I wanted to be Bob. More on that later.
Okay. The very next movie we're going to review is Friday the 13th, and that starts with a point of view kill. And that's not accidental. No. Like, much like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, this movie has a reputation of being this blood-soaked article. Like, this is one of the most horrifying, brutal slasher films you can see. Other than PJ Soles showing her boobs very briefly, this is a PG movie. You could air this in prime time almost
This
anywhere.
is played every Halloween on TV, and very little is changed.
Yeah, and it's
for the TV
still
broadcast.
scary as shit, by the way.
Yeah, it's all mood and atmosphere, and I think this should be everyone's maybe first slasher film. You could almost watch it with your kids. Maybe not yet yours or mine, but I think when they're old enough
to appreciate the genre.
Let's give them a little freak out and have them up all night, not able to sleep.
Because the movie wasn't built on the kills, they weren't setting up a kill. Like you'll see in future slasher movies, there'll be a character that has this one trait, and that trait will ironically be used to kill them. They're an alcoholic, so they use a beer bottle to kill them, or something sort of ironic or anything like that. This is not that. This is just cruel fate. Michael Myers seems to be possessive of this small town and the house where he lived in, and he seems to run dormant. He's like scary and intimidating, but he doesn't seem to be active. It has to be Halloween.
Yeah.
And on Halloween, if you cross his path, you're just dead. That is it. Again, it's not personal. It's not like Leatherface in that he's desperate and horrified himself.
Yeah,
But I don't even get the feeling like he's particularly enjoying it necessarily either.
I think Leatherface's family is probably evil, and they've made him this way. But I think Michael is just...
He's all business.
He's just evil. And
I'm here to kill, and that's what I'm going to do. I like the idea of him just being a force of evil. It's not because he had a white trash, abusive stepfather. Yeah. I like one day something took hold of him, or something snapped in his head.
Just grabbed a knife and
that was the day. And the fact that in his psychosis or in his possession or whatever you want to call it is specific to Halloween. I do think that much like the Friday the 13th series, there's an element of sexuality to it. Mike Myers seems to particularly like to hunt people who are, you get the feeling, especially with his sister's death, that there's some sort of a sexual component there.
She was promiscuous and...
Yeah. But why would a 10-year-old boy, clock that,
It's very simple. Michael escapes from the mental institution and heads back to his hometown, and it's all mood and atmosphere, and it's spooky, and I think it's because it's simple. Maybe that's part of its charm, or its creep factor. Is it could be any town, it could be any babysitter. They're not targeted for any specific reason other than maybe is because she walks by his house, drops off the keys, and he notices him, follows him. But
she just picks her.
That could be any babysitter. That could be you, or it could be.
It is about mood, like you say, but I also think that maybe another one of the secret weapons of this movie, two of them, crack that thing.
We're about 6 beers in, so forgive me.
It's all good.
It's been a long time since I saw you, Larry.
It's true. The two things, I think the two secret weapons to Halloween, the part of the reasons that it lasts forever, is John Carpenter's score.
Yes, I was going to say.
That very simple piano score, which apparently...
So beautiful.
He based that off. His dad taught him to hit bongo drums when he was a kid.
Really?
And the basic rhythm, one of the first things they teach you is... And he just took that and put it on a piano. And it was as simple as that. It was just...
I have the theme to Halloween on my iPod.
Exactly. But Psycho, fairly simple, stabby score, right? Yeah. Or Jaws, bump, 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 bump. Simple works, And
the jump rope song in Nightmare on Elm Street.
Absolutely.
Same thing, but
very simple nursery rhyme.
I think this one wins for I mean, it's just that.
As soon as you hear those piano chords, you know exactly
I popped in the
where you are.
DVD that I've seen countless times, and as soon as that piano starts, I never forward opening credits. I think I sit down. It's
part of the movie.
Yeah, it's part of the movie. I sit and it gets you in the mood, and that's that slow burn into the pumpkin and the music. It's that you're right.
Yeah,
and they play it throughout the whole movie too, just different. That
different pace.
Dun, dun.
Yeah, I think the other thing that they have is Donald Pleasance. Veteran actor, probably the only name attached. Like at the time, Jamie Lee Curtis was just some kid. Really, she was daughter of Hollywood royalty, but she hadn't established her own career by any respect. They had Donald Pleasance for 3 or 4 days on the shoot.
Is that it?
And
they made the best.
He was the star, and that was a big part of the budget to get some kind of name. And he's also given, I think, in a lot of ways, really cheesy dialogue. But there's something
he overplays.
There's
through the franchise of it.
It's true, and the later we go into it, the more it's laid on really thick, though.
Yeah.
But there's something about his performance of it. Even if it was a paycheck production for him, Donald Pleasance was going to do everything he could to earn his money and give them their money's worth. And I think that beyond our own fear of the babysitters being stalked and what are going to happen to these teenagers, because Michael Myers doesn't have a voice, all of this background is given to us by Loomis. And because Loomis is terrified of Michael Myers, we're terrified of Michael Myers.
Yeah.
I think those two elements, more so than the basic simplicity of the Halloween title and the babysitters, like the universal sort of appeal, like you talked about with When a Stranger Calls, is being the babysitter in the big empty house and being responsible, even though maybe you're technically not old enough to be holding the reins yet,
Well, so you mentioned there's Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah.
There's Donald Pleasance, but to me the real star is PJ Soles as Linda.
Yes, really.
Yeah, she was the girl with the red cap and Carrie.
Yep.
Right there. Riff Randall in Rock and Roll High School, and then Halloween, obviously, and that's where we get a little glimpse of.
See anything you like, Scott?
PJ Soles had that certain something in my formative young years, and she was my first girlfriend, and she just didn't know it.
She didn't realize that.
No, I was growing up thinking this one day me and PJ will be together. Oh, Stripes, that's the other one.
That's great. I'm glad that she aroused something in you.
But she was the flirty kind of party girl, and in Halloween, and. Yeah.
She kind of...
She said totally 8 times in the movie.
Totally?
Yeah, if you notice, she keeps saying totally. And I know in interviews, she's like embarrassed about that, how many times. And I said, I'm going to start counting. I just put a little tick down. And
Several.
I got 8 totals. Yeah, and a partial nude scene. So now, did you get that? I noticed here that the little pedophile remark from Bob. When our first introduction, that's Linda, PJ's boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
They show up at the house. And they've been drinking beers. They're driving in the van. And they say, okay, let me get this straight. This is the plan. First, I'm going to rip your clothes off. Then you're going to rip my clothes off. And then we're both going to rip Lindsay's clothes off. That's the little girl that they're babysitting. And she laughs and says, totally.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, did that just happen? Are they joking?
But what I will say is that these kids are likable and relatable in a way that a lot of horror movies miss. They don't do things that are loudly stupid, I didn't think. I don't remember any scenes in this movie going, why in the fucking world are you doing that? And because unfortunately most of the victims here don't even know Michael Myers isn't a person out there in the world until he's, got a phone cord wrapped around their neck, or he's pinned them to the wall with a butcher knife,
Well, in some of these movies you'll call bullshit, like you're saying.
Yeah.
There's one moment in this movie where the movie calls bullshit. That's when Michael escapes, and the doctor says, well... how would he learn how to drive a car? He's been institutionalized for 15 years. And, and Loomis says, well, he was doing fine last night. To me, the movie just called bullshit there, saying, hey, wait, how is he driving a car? He can't drive a car. It's like, shut up, we're making a movie here.
Michael Myers could drive because at that moment he needed to drive to get away.
I find it funny that the movie said, wait a second, he can't drive a car. And Loomis says, shh, shut up.
Shenanigans.
Bullshit.
Shenanigans.
I mean, I think it's because I've seen this movie 10 plus times. You start noticing now, you can pick it apart a bit, but it's beloved as a film from your youth. But when Laurie's walking to school, she crosses paths with the little boy that she's going to babysit later that night. And they also stop at the Myers house to drop off the keys. And then they continue walking to school and they split paths. Yet, they're establishing all these locations are within walking distance from each other.
Correct.
Yet when it's time to babysit, her friend picks her up and they drive across town. going downtown past the hardware store that was broken into in the middle of a weekday. For some reason, the hardware store wasn't open on Halloween. It's a national holiday or something in Haddonfield. And they get to the house where they're babysitting, and it's pitch black out by that time. So they've been driving, I don't know.
All day.
Yeah, an hour. They leave the house, I think they say it's 6 or 6:30. And there's a sudden... it's at the 35-minute mark of the movie. There's a noticeable change in light. That's what I wrote down. It goes from, they drive by the hardware store, which just went through the world's quickest inventory. They said, hey, what happened here, Dad? Oh, someone broke into the hardware store, but all they stole was one mask, some rope, and a couple of knives. So they did inventory of the whole store. They wait, there's a mask missing and some rope. And it just seemed very...
reminded of Psycho in its sort of painstakingly talking you through the story beats and making sure everybody understands what's going on. They're not giving you enough credit to assume, yes, Michael Myers broke into the store to get stuff that he would use for his killing spree.
And it's a half-hour drive to the house that you just walked past this morning.
In an earlier scene. It's funny, I've seen this movie a lot of times too, and I guess I've never managed to care enough to call bullshit on that, because to me it's just about babysitters being stalked at night, It doesn't bother me that much.
It didn't bother me either. I think the reason I looked at it is because you told me to take 6 movies that... or 5 movies that I loved and another one, but and you told me to rank them, so I have to
find reasons.
I have to find, why is this one going to be higher than this one? And I hate going to a game and seeing a tie. There's no ties are allowed. I hate you spend money, go to a game, and someone says, "Hey, how was the game? Who won?" You know what? Nobody fucking won. I paid $90. Nobody fucking won.
That's bullshit.
You know what? We're gonna have winners. There's gonna be number 1, number 2, number 3. I didn't want to make anyone pass number 3, but I had to. So I have to look for reasons, and that's maybe why I was being a little bit pickier than I normally is.
Yeah. Well, I think what makes up for any continuity stuff for me is Michael Myers. For a dude who has no lines of dialogue, he has real fucking menace and real presence in this movie.
And asthma.
But just like when you see him standing by the side of a house outside, just stoically, just seeing him standing there, there's something disturbing about it. He hasn't done anything yet. He's just a dude standing there, but you're like, oh,
there's that one scene where Jamie Lee Curtis is there, and he just appears in the doorway behind her.
And
it's all lighting. And it's dark, and then all of a sudden you just see his face kind of materializes, and that's...
And he never seems to make sound other than breathing. Like when he gets stabbed in the eye with a coat hanger.
Yeah, a bit of a moaner.
He's just like, it's like, what the fuck, And the most famous thing, and I don't think anybody who's seen the movie can ever forget it, it's really like the shower murder of the movie.
Are we talking about PJ Soul's boobs again?
Yes, no. Okay. Her boyfriend who gets pinned to the wall.
Yeah.
And it's not just that he gets pinned to the wall. It's once he's pinned there and dead, Mike Myers looks at him and tilts his head and sort of like appreciates his work for a second.
Yeah.
And there's something utterly chilling about it. And it's so efficiently done. There's no dialogue. We don't see any inner life to Michael other than what we invent ourselves. But he is somehow given depth by the tilt of a head or just his appearance in a shadow in the way that I don't think Freddy Krueger or Jason ever manage in that regard,
And regarding that scene, this is, again, I'm maybe picking it apart. You're realizing how that could never happen. That knife could not go through his body and through the wall enough to support his weight. So there I am criticizing a slasher film where it's like, wait, because again, that wasn't even a wall he was pinned on. That was a closet. It was a flimsy closet he was banging against. It was opening and closing. And
right.
Maybe every time I've seen this movie previously, I've loved that scene until you told me to rank these movies. And I'm saying, well, you know what, actually? That knife is not long enough to go through a human body and through the wall and support his weight. And blah, blah, blah. But previous viewings, it was a great scene.
If you want to pull a thread and pick apart this movie, like you will. Even Psycho, like I said, the painstaking plot points that kind of suddenly dead end on you. That like, why did we spend so much time on that? You never really kind of know. It's just like, it's not misdirection. It's just what it is.
Well, I don't mind movies spending times on things that aren't important, because it kind of misdirection, I guess, or not everything that happens in your life leads to a certain point, but
for me, like I say, I could pick holes in any of these movies,
right? And I think I felt like I had to because 4 of these movies could have been number 1 for me.
So that's tricky, yeah.
And so I thought, well, because I hate ties, I have to go to a shootout.
Yeah.
And so one of these has to win in a shootout. So the body count, by the way, for this is 4 teenagers, 1 adult off screen, and 2 dogs.
Yeah.
For those keeping score at home. One dog we see Michael pick up and goes, "Rape!"
Yeah.
And the other one we don't see dead, but they walk into the Myers house and say, "Oh, look, there's a dog." And he goes, "He got hungry." So we don't know what the fuck happened with that dog, but...
And that just goes to show how evil Michael Myers is. You know, he can kill as many teenagers as he wants, but you don't fucking kill a dog
and eat it.
Yeah, that's too far.
My biggest problem with Halloween, I hope you can help me, or there's maybe an addition out there. If you look on the counter, watch it again, 1 hour, 19 minutes, and 40 seconds. It always feels to me that there's a scene missing here. That's at the point, Laurie, she outruns him back to the house. She gets inside, locks the door, yells at the kids, "Go hide, hide." And she doesn't leave that room, and then all of a sudden it feels like there's a scene missing because she's in the room all by herself, and the mood just kind of changes. She looks at the window, and the window's open. And somehow in that time frame, Michael got in the house, and he's hiding behind the couch.
Right.
But it just does. It feels like
It seems
something's
too
missing.
quick somehow.
How did he get there? She beat him to the house,
Yeah.
and she got inside. She never left that room.
Yeah.
And I always forget about this, and because I love the movie, and you watch it, and you just, when it happens, I think, wait a second, how did he get there? And then, but the movie moves on so fast from there, you forget about it until Rank and Review tells you to pick apart movies. I've always wondered. It feels like there's a deleted scene that they took out for some reason that I've never seen.
Well, maybe they had a shot of him approaching the house or ducking in the window really quickly, or a background shot. But Carpenter decided it would be more impactful for the audience not to see him until he decided.
And maybe that goes with him being the shape and just materializing. But I think Michael is a human being. He can't just, he's not a spiritual or a ghost entity or something. So.
Well, and this is again something we'll keep on talking about other movies peripheral to this. But when you look at the Friday the 13th series, Jason starts teleporting. He's wherever he needs to be to kill the next victim.
Another thing that this movie establishes for future slasher movies is the he's not dead yet.
Open-ended.
She kills him twice, and then right as soon as she kills him, she has a knife in her hand and she throws it. Like, she doesn't just drop it. She goes, "Well, this is over," and just throws the knife across the room, and and then he gets up. Then he attacks her again in the closet. She stabs him in the eye or the neck, or I think it was the eye in that one, with the hanger. And then she walks over him, throws the knife on the floor, and...
But in a way, it's not the final boo scare, which is what I like. What we're going to see soon is this need for horror movies to have a big boo at the end of the movie to make everyone jump.
Yeah, the Carrie scare, right?
Yeah, and Halloween doesn't do that. Instead of a big boo at the end, they send you out of the theater, and Michael Myers was not caught.
Yeah, he could be he's in your backyard right now when you get home from the theater. Or he's
Evil is punished fairly definitively in movies previous to this. Halloween, whether they meant to at the time, franchised themselves almost instantly by A, making a shit ton of money, and B, leaving their, mute killer.
Well, it's perfectly set up for a sequel, but I mean, this is even before sequels, right? Where sequels weren't a thing you did in 78, were they? Or
not? They weren't common.
No,
they weren't like you didn't make a horror movie planning to make a franchise of horror.
They didn't make Halloween saying, we're going to make like 9 of these things, and we're going to make so much fucking money.
Yeah, I'm going to have so many new houses for this. And
they said, let's go make a Boogeyman movie and spend $300,000. And
I think, warts and all, I kind of think Halloween's a fairly amazing slasher movie.
It's well shot. It's well put together, and yeah, it's good. One thing in Michael's favor, as opposed to a lot of these other killers, is he's taken seriously, and he continues to be taken seriously, whereas Freddy gets a little bit silly near the end. Jason, he's not in the Friday the 13th, but he becomes kind of humorous. He goes to space. He takes Manhattan. Leatherface puts on women's clothing. So, I mean, but Michael is just this guy that you just don't want to fuck with. So.
Yeah. There is a weird timeless quality to this movie. I mean, you can tell it was made in the late 70s, early 80s, but it ages really well.
There's no cell phones in anyone's pockets. So, I mean, that ruined horror movies, having a cell phone.
During the spookiest time of the year, there are a few guidelines all ghosts and goblins should follow. Always stay on sidewalks. Never go to a stranger's house. And never go out alone.
This is the one night that all sorts of things roam free. Sorry. All these traditions.
Wait.
What?
You're supposed to keep it lit.
Why?
Ancient tradition?
Putting on costumes.
I look like I'm 5. You look great. What did we do now? We meet our dates.
Jack-o'-lanterns.
Why are we here? To pay our respects to the dead? The Halloween school bus massacre.
They started to protect us, but...
What in God's name are you doing down there? Hiding bodies?
Nowadays, no one really cares.
This one's still lit.
Trick or treat?
Trick or treat.
Trick or treat, man. This is written and directed by Michael Dougherty. He was wrapped up in the first X-Men movie with Bryan Singer, who is a producer on this. And the word on the street is when Bryan Singer decided not to do X-Men 3 and instead to do a very mediocre Superman movie, he jumped ship from the studios, and they punished him by basically burying this movie Trick or Treat. It was released very quietly with very little fanfare or advertising and sort of died a quick and quiet death. It's become sort of a bit of a cult object. The fans have discovered it as time has gone on, and I think it's a completely decent Halloween night movie. What do you think of Trick or Treat?
This is a very, very special movie. It's completely deserving of all of the praise that it gets. I was a little bit disappointed when I picked it up and saw that they were all written and directed by Mike Dougherty, because I liked the styles of the previous movies where we got different writing styles and different directorial styles. But in this case, it works very well with Trick or Treat.
It gives it a uniformity of vision, I guess.
Plus, it lets the director do certain things that weren't possible in the other movies, as in all the stories are linked and woven together and
we
shot
jump
out
around
of sequence.
In time, yeah, it's sort of Pulp Fiction style presentation of these stories.
Yes. So it starts off with a murder, and you're not really sure if you like. I wasn't sure if I liked the murder when I saw it.
Yeah.
It seemed a little bit pointless, but it gets better because we come back to it later on.
Yeah,
in
we
the movie.
built our way back to that point, and then it seems sort of to fit in with the rest of the movie more. At first, it's like, okay, here's a derivative kill to start the movie. Ho hum, ho hum.
Yes.
But when you watch it the second time, I think you'll find you've got a big smile on your face.
Indeed. And so the first story, is, according to Wikipedia, is titled The Principal.
Which largely concerns Dylan Baker.
Yes, playing the murderous Principal Wilkins, trying to cover up his poisoning of one of his students. And the tension is ratcheted up as we realize that he's beginning to contemplate murdering his own son.
You get that impression, like he's really getting irritated by his adorable squeaky voiced child.
Yes.
And, he's trying to bury a body in the backyard. His kid's yelling at him from the window. He's dealing with his crotchety old neighbor next door. And you get the feeling like he really takes Halloween seriously. This is like his Christmas, birthday, Thanksgiving all wrapped up into one. His Halloween for this guy. And instead of celebrating it with friends or getting drunk, he commits random murders.
Yes, but this first story also goes very well to establishing the rules of this universe, which is
respect
Halloween and its traditions. We dress up as monsters on Halloween to scare away real spooks, and we appease them by giving them candy.
Yeah.
And this comes into play later on in the movie, as we'll find out.
Scenes that seem like they might be extemporaneous are not in this movie. They just their relevance isn't necessarily obvious immediately.
Mm-hmm. Now, at this point, I actually would like to say, if any listeners out there haven't seen this movie,
watch it first.
Watch it first, because what we're going to be talking about here is going to spoil all of the stories. And this movie is all about its twists. So, seriously, skip to the next one. Or start watching Yeah.
Again, the magical thing about podcasts, you can listen to them whenever you want. If you haven't seen Trick or Treat, get your hands to it. Watch it. I would not want to spoil this movie for anyone.
So, the one thing I'll take away from the principal, probably the line when his kid shouts out the window, "Charlie Brown's an asshole!" Love it. Next story is the school bus massacre revisited.
Yes. A group of kids are, well, I guess they're slightly too old to trick or treat, but, well, they're too old to go and get candy, but they're old enough to pull off some mean pranks. And they're collecting pumpkins, and they're inviting this weird girl who's dressed up like a witch and who's presumably somewhere on the autism spectrum, who's a little bit off, and they're going to scare her on Halloween. The leader of the group, which I thought was a brilliant choice, is dressed as an angel, and is just wonderfully characterized by this young actress as that really pretty spoiled girl who is just so awful.
Indeed.
And she can charm anyone with a smile and her wet little eyes and convince anyone to do anything for her, but she's just bad.
What makes this particular story a joy is that they got such great kids.
All of the actors did a great job.
Yeah, you compare and contrast the kids from Kick the Can.
Yeah.
Just world of difference from the woodenness that Spielberg had versus the vibrancy of the performances in School Bus Massacre.
And between the types of all those kids, I think everybody will find one kid that they'll identify with out of that group.
Yes.
There's that softer kid who's sort of being dragged kicking and screaming into it. You kind of feel the worst for because you just know he wasn't a bad kid. It was just the circumstances kind of got carried away on him. And then there was the other boy who was just crushing on this leader of the group and basically mindlessly doing anything she says until it starts getting out of hand.
Yes, and it does get out of hand, but then bad things actually happen when the real ghosts come to get them, and that is legitimately scary. Mm-hmm. And once again, very realistic performances are dragged out of these kids. Yeah, fantastic story.
Yeah. The great thing that I like, and it's again, we're talking spoilers, but she sets up the story of the school bus that sank into the reservoir.
Rock quarry,
pardon me. And you during the context of that story, we believe she's trying to scare this little girl. The story that she's telling is true. It's not just a Halloween story, as we find out. Not just in this segment, but it has ties to things that we see subsequently. And I thought that was very clever to double down on that bus story.
Yes, the school bus is actually there.
Yeah.
3 young ladies go out Halloween partying, and with the object of letting Anna Paquin's character have a good first time.
Yes.
And we assume that this means that she's going to have her virginity taken from her this evening. But as we discover, they are all 3 of them werewolves, and it's actually her first human kill that they're introducing her to.
Another great juxtaposition too. They're all dressed as fairy tale characters.
Yes.
So they all again look very beautiful and very pretty and very sweet, and they are not beautiful or pretty or sweet.
And in fact, Anna Paquin is dressed as Red Riding Hood, which makes it very ironic that she's a wolf. And Principal Wilkins shows up.
Yeah, he's on the menu for that night.
Yes. So this was an okay story. What I really liked about it was, of course, the twist at the end, discovering that all 3 of them are werewolves, and then once they transform, that's just fantastic with the flesh zippers.
Yeah.
Where they throw off their human skins.
And yeah, I love how, they just completely embraced it. They did a great transformation sequence. The werewolves were creepy and sexy, and, good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
I think it was probably the least complicated story that he told here as far as, I was not surprised by the twist in that story, whereas the other stories had, I think, the twist kind of got me a little bit. You know?
I was quite surprised because first of all, we had no idea who this vampire character was that was walking around biting people. Mm-hmm. And I was convinced that he was going to do something terrible to Anna Paquin. Yeah. And then when it turns out to be Principal Wilkins and she eats him.
It's not subtle, though, at all. With the whole thing is, her mom says, always referred to her as the runt of the little litter, and meeting at, was it Sheep's Grove, that they were sending the guys to meet them, and the Red Riding Hood thing. And you get to the point where you're looking for the twist, or at least I do sometimes. I can't help it.
I missed all of those references when I saw it.
Yeah, that was the one that I caught. I just knew that I wasn't afraid for Anna Paquin's character for whatever reason. Even if I didn't know necessarily, how it was going to play out or that the principal was going to be involved in that story as well. I was pretty sure that, she was going to wolf out at some point.
Well, I'm sorry that you had this delightful story spoiled by your own reaching for what the plot is going to be.
Just take the ride, Parsons. Just take the ride.
So, story number 4 is called Sam.
Yes.
And stars Brian Cox as he does battle with the evil spirit of Halloween. Sam, or Sam Hain.
Brian Cox has come up a few times in the podcast already. I'm a big fan. I think he's got a lot of range, and yet he's always somehow Brian Cox at the same time whenever you see him. There's something really great about his voice in this movie. It sounds almost like he had a chest cold or like a wheeze going, and we find out why he's playing it that way later on. Because I guess we'll just go right to it. We find out he was actually the bus driver that drove the bus into the rock quarry later on. And when in the story she told, we saw the driver hitting the shore. And as he got to the shore, he was making this terrible wheezing sound. Mm-hmm. And that's how it threaded back to the Brian Cox character. Because he was just... he seemed like he was he looks like an old fellow, but he seemed like he was playing it like an even older dude in a lot of ways.
Yes, he seems to live a very unhealthy life. And once again, Brian Cox, great performance, really disappears into the role. You'd never guess that he's a Scottish gentleman the way that he roars at people in this and wheezes. And
I think in a lot of ways this story is maybe... they're all kind of ridiculous, but this is like a pretty out there chapter in the movie. And you really need an actor who's going to commit and sell and not wink. Mm-hmm. And Brian Cox was there for him 100%.
The coolest part of this is when Mr. Krieg, that's his character's name, blows Sam's head open with a shotgun, and there's all that stringy pumpkin goop inside.
Yes.
Love that.
Sam is, I guess, this weird Halloween figure. We haven't really mentioned him. We see him briefly at the beginning. He commits that first murder, but he looks like a little kid in a particularly filthy ghost Halloween costume.
Or a scarecrow or something.
But if you disrespect the rules of Halloween, Sam's going to give you some shit. Like, the girl at the beginning was taking down the decorations before Halloween was over. It's a big no-no. And Brian Cox was scaring kids away from his house and not giving out candy.
Doesn't believe in Halloween, and he learns that lesson very hard.
Homie, don't play that. Yep. Homie, don't play that. Sam's going to come pay you a visit. Mm-hmm. And basically what we see is this poor old guy being sieged by this supernatural, unkillable, sadistic creature, which doesn't seem intent on killing him, just hurting him repeatedly.
And there's a great scare in that as well when we first see Sam as he climbs up onto the bed.
Yes.
I love that. So, and then it all ties in so nicely at the end where we discover that the very first scene happens right after the last scene of
Sam leaves that house and walks across the street to see this woman taking down her Halloween decorations.
Mm-hmm.
All of this that we have just talked about, I should add, is in like a lean 82 minutes. It's amazing how much story he packed into 82 minutes. And like they all work. Even like I complained if it wasn't really a complaint. I kind of felt like I knew where the Anna Paquin thing was going. It didn't really hurt the enjoyment of it at all. I mean, I at least got the twist of the principal being involved. But this movie's got everything, and the kitchen sink. You know, you got your werewolves, you got that weird little pumpkin kid, you got zombies, serial killers, bullying kids. All of the stories pay off. They have sort of, they have their own little twists and wrinkles to them. I mean, it's a really fantastic anthology film, and it's going to rank high for me.
I can't think of anything bad to say about it.
Coming soon.
I know you think it's silly, but I really can feel something here, Paul.
So what are we going to do about it?
What if Jacob and May came up for the weekend? She told me once that people pay her to do seances.
This house has an energy all its own. We don't need to find the darkness here, Paul. It's everywhere.
So I want to talk about this movie directed and written by Dan Gagan, we've decided. Is how we say that last name?
That's according to the internet, and we know the internet is to be believed.
This, I think, is an interesting little low-budget number. I mean, this is another one, like I said with The Awakenings, where I constantly thought that I knew where it was going, but as it turns out, I didn't really know where it was going. And I was surprised by that. The movie surprised me on several occasions. Honestly, Matthew, with the exception of one scene that I want to talk about, there's not a bunch that I would change about this movie. It's got people that I like in it. It's definitely made by somebody who understands tone and loves horror movies. And it lulls you into this feeling of a nice PG ghost movie and then slaps you in the face with a vicious, violent horror film. What did you think of We Are Still Here?
The thing that struck me right away that I thought they did a brilliant job of was making it feel like a movie that was filmed in the 1970s.
Yep.
So in exactly the same way that the last two movies didn't sell their period quality to me, this one totally did. And it was like just simple quality of film, lighting stuff. It was consistent, and I think it was done on a pretty low budget.
Very low.
I mean, I think it just goes to show that this kind of thing is achievable. It was shot in upstate New York, but it reminded me of Saskatchewan in the winter, which I really liked.
Yep.
And in fact, I thought it was filmed in Canada. They'd had a very 1970s Canadian, like one of those tax incentive movies that got filmed in Canada in the late 70s, early 80s.
I'm sure that the people who made that movie would take that as an insult, but they shouldn't.
The people that made We Are Still Here?
Yeah, might take it
I think that's exactly what they were going for.
No, but they might take it as an insult that it reflective of a Canadian-made film, right? But it's not an insult. I mean, I've thought that too. Like, this could take place in Saskatchewan. This would be a cool horror movie that could be set here. It's this really rural, really flat, really large, bleak, white, lonely landscape. Should we talk about the plot?
And also... Sure, but I just want to clarify my point too about it looking Canadian, which I don't necessarily think of as a criticism, but that's also not what I meant.
Right.
That a lot of the horror and slasher classics from the late 70s and early 80s were actually shot in Canada because the Trudeau administration in particular was giving tax incentives. So you would have like corporations that just wanted a tax write-off fund some movie that was never, it wasn't a Canadian movie, it would get released in the States, but there was just a bunch of these things churned out in Canada, and this just captured the aesthetic of those movies, and that genre, particularly of horror movie, captured it so nicely for me.
Yeah, and I agree. The premise is once again shockingly familiar. A couple who have recently suffered the loss of their son in a car accident move to a new home in a rural location, meet some very creepy neighbors, and the wife is convinced that she hears her son Bobby in the house. they invite their friends, very amusingly played by Lisa Marie and Larry Fessenden, to come over and help them solve this mystery and decide if the problems are supernatural, psychological, or otherwise. As it turns out, I think they're all three.
Yeah, it does get weird with the multiple antagonists at the end.
Yep.
There are creepy ghosts living in the house killing people,
Mm-hmm.
but they're also inexplicably working with the mayor of the town. This is actually where it's going to get into problem territory for me. I'm not sure. You just said that you liked it all except for one scene,
Yeah.
so I'm not sure if this is what you had in mind, the sort of climax. But before the climax, I guess there was another kind of mini climax. So they first move into the house, and creepy things are happening. And then, was it the mayor of the town?
His role seemed a little
guy?
bit rare, but a little bit hard to put your finger on. He definitely spoke on behalf of the town, and he definitely had a lot of authority. But the way he was playing it is that he was just a guy who lived in the neighborhood who knew his way around, right? But we increasingly see that the town kowtows to him a lot.
Yeah, so he stopped by on their first night with his wife, who looked really scared, and he seemed to know just a little bit too much about the people that had lived in the house originally, who had gotten run out of town because why were they run out of town? He killed somebody?
They ran a mortuary.
No, he was selling corpses.
They ran a mortuary, and the story was that the family had been selling corpses, so they were run out of town. What we find out is that family was actually sacrificed to the evil, and their vengeful spirits are trapped in the house. So now the town, instead of doing the sacrifice to keep the crops growing or to keep this town strong, instead of getting their own hands dirty, they leave the house unoccupied until it's time to make an offering, and then they sell it to an unknowing couple, and that's sort of their next sacrifice, right? That's how they keep the wheels spinning. That's the basic setup. So we can be, at the beginning, we're wondering, is it a ghost story? Is it she going crazy? Or are the neighbors out to get her? And in the end, like I said, it's kind of all three.
There's a couple of good scenes that take place at the local bar.
Yep.
The first one is when the couple and their seance friends pop into the local tavern for a hamburger, and they go into the bar, and in true small town in movies fashion, all the heads turn to them and they're made to feel really unwelcome.
Everything drops to dead silence is what I was saying. Like when they get into the restaurant, a bustling restaurant all of a sudden just drops to dead silence. You can hear a pin drop because new people. The only thing I can compare it to is the slaughtered lamb in An American Werewolf in London. Like they hit it pretty hard, but I liked it. I thought it was amusing.
Yeah, I thought that scene was great. And then there was another good scene where the bar owner, who had been really suspiciously snotty to them, was talking to her head waitress. And then there was a knock at the door, and she told the head waitress to go answer it. And then there was a gunshot.
Yes.
And then it was this old guy who I thought was the mayor of the town. And then he came in and he's like, okay, there's people. And it was a nice, surprising scene. Like, it was totally aware. You know that something weird's going on, but it just goes to the nuclear option right away.
Yeah.
And they're just killing people abruptly.
Well, honestly...
Which I thought was great.
That's funny, because we're agreeing on the movie. I think we both liked the movie, but we seem to be disagreeing on that scene. Because honestly, that was the scene that I was talking about that I have a big question about. Why did he shoot that waitress?
Yeah, so I liked that scene because this is about where the movie changed its tone, almost like in the movie Ravenous, where it starts to feel like it's taking a 90-degree turn here.
Yeah.
Because it's also going to become a lot more brutal after this scene. I do agree that was ultimately confusing, so I liked that scene a lot more when I thought it would be explained. But there's sort of a recurring problem with this movie, which is that a lot that gets told in exposition dumps. I think I mentioned that earlier on in the episode, that this is a bit of a theme with some of these movies. But I think it's the owner of the bar and the waitress that have a conversation out of nowhere about how exactly every 30 years this house needs to have a family. So like there's too much specific information that there's no reason for them to be talking about.
Right.
And then there's not enough information when there ought to be information. Like, why did he kill that waitress? I mean, she seems to know something about what's going on, but we never really find out who knows what or why.
Yeah. I think...
we also don't know...
For me, it was just strange because... They were finally making conclusively the reveal on the friendly neighbor man. Like, we knew something was up. This was the scene where we know he's fucking evil. But these are people that are in the town. These are people that are one of they're on his team. They may be incompetent. He may be angry at them. But honestly, I think it would have been as impactful or more if, like, he would ask the waitress something and she was, like, just vaguely dismissive of him. And then he just shot out and smacked her in the mouth. Something like really vicious happened. The fact that he just executed that waitress because she told him the restaurant was closed bordered on comic to me.
Well, I kind of thought they were taking a comic turn towards the end, because there's also going to be a time when the mayor is talking to these two charcoaly ghosts, and he tells them that they should have killed the family in the house. He's like, I'm glad you like killing people, but why did you just decide not to kill these people? And there was something almost campy about that exchange. Because again, with the not enough information, we don't ever we're never really told what the relationship is between this guy and the ghost. Like, why don't they just kill him at that point?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think...
Which, in fact, they do, but why does he think they're not going to?
Well, because he thinks that he's giving them what they want in the family. Here's my interpretation, and I will say that this is my interpretation, so I could be wrong. Bobby, their son, is also in the house. So I think that Bobby is sort of the representative to the other side. These are vengeful ghosts, and they're sort of stuck in the house, and they'd be just as happy to bring this vengeance to the town. In fact, the town deserves their vengeance. So by not sacrificing these people, by luring the town in, the ghosts can exact their vengeance. I don't think that the parents were in any danger of the ghosts. I think that the ghosts attacked the two kids that came in because they were strangers. They seemed to come in uninvited, and they did everything wrong, right? They went down in the basement, right? So those kills were just the ghosts doing their job. My interpretation, and again, this is where I came from, is that they had somebody speaking for them on the other side, and that's why the mother and father were spared.
Yeah, I think that's a great reading of it, but I do think it's significant how far beyond the actual text you had to go to put that reading together, because none of that is really told to us. So, I mean, you made sense of it in a way that...
Yeah, I think we are conclusively told that Bobby is in the house at the very last scene. And when I watched the movie the second and third time, because I've seen it 3 times now, because I really like it... the soundtrack, you can actually hear Bobby's voice a few times earlier in the film. When she says that she can hear Bobby, this actress, Barbara Crampton, who was sort of a scream queen in the 80s and has sort of been reinvented as a character actress in her later life, when she keeps on saying she hears Bobby, this is not a hysterical, grieving mother. She hears Bobby. And at first, Bobby's telling them to leave the house, and when they don't leave the house, Bobby's starting to tell the ghosts, don't kill my parents, kill the people who wronged you.
No, do you actually hear him say that?
You don't hear him say that, but you do hear them say, get out of the house, and you do hear him say, I think, just the word mom earlier in the film. Like, you hear his voice.
So I never thought that, I always thought that Bobby was in the house, or at least when we definitively know that there's ghosts. I could put that together. I had always imagined that he was using some ghost power to perhaps protect them or to dissuade the ghosts from getting them. And so then when there's The one black character who's in the film that predictably gets killed right away,
Yep.
Or the two teenagers that were going to have sex when they get killed when the parents are out of the house, because maybe there's no Bobby ghost to save them, and it just so happens that there's this force that's pushing back a little bit against these malevolent ghosts, and perhaps buying them some time, but maybe his powers, he won't ultimately be able to save them. That's what I thought was going on. Your reading of it seems perhaps more plausible to me, but in both cases we just don't know, right? Like, ultimately what we do know is Bobby is in the house, or we can be quite sure from the last scene that Bobby's in the house.
One of the last
But we
words
also
out of
really
Big
don't
Bad are, these people have been in the house for 3 weeks and they're still alive. Is there something special about them? So clearly there has been some mitigating factor.
Right, and I didn't have problems with any of that. What I had problems with was really not knowing what the relationship was between the town and the house.
Right.
Like, we could guess, but we have to guess. And because there was such dramatic shit that happened, like the angry mob that went into the house basically to kill the family.
That was an amazing sequence.
It was great. It was so fun. Like, there were so many fun kills. When the guy was doing the seance, their friend, who actually was psychic, it turned out.
Yeah.
And then it looked like he was going to kill them, but instead he puts a poker in his own eye.
Yeah.
That was great. I mean, there was fun stuff like that. That's also where it felt a little bit similar to the movie Ravenous for me, in that it became a slightly different movie. Although it became a movie that I really liked watching.
Yes. That's Larry Fessenden. He's actually a writer-director. The actor who stabs himself in the eye with that poker is a gifted filmmaker, and I've talked about him in other podcasts. Usually he's the guy in the movie for one scene and he dies. He's the guy at the end of session 9 who shows up for work on the wrong day. He often will show up in these like one scene roles in horror movies, and I love that he got a whole part in this movie. He still played the same role as the guy who shows up at the wrong place at the wrong time and dies, but his character was much more rich. I actually really enjoyed him and Lisa Marie as this like hippie couple that everyone would dismiss, but who are actually kind of legit.
Yeah. No, I liked him a lot. I liked him and Lisa Marie quite a lot. In fact, all of the performances I really liked. A couple of the things that I noticed right away, it had this really long opening sequence of them driving up to the house, and it was two actors that I didn't really recognize. As it turns out, she's what's her name?
Barbara Crampton. You may know her from Reanimator.
Sort of protagonist. Barbara Crampton.
You may know her from Reanimator.
Yeah, I don't know the movie that well, and It was made like 30 years ago. But I like that it was Virtual Unknowns. It went for a long time without a single word of dialogue. I liked that. And then when the movie changed tone, I thought it changed tone well. But again, I keep coming back to this. There's at least 2 scenes that are just pure dumps of information that it felt like the writers just couldn't get it in. And so there's these big, long, clumsy dumps. But even with that, we still don't really get it. Like, it felt like the movie really needed another draft. The directing was spot on, but I do think there were script problems.
Yeah. Well, for me, I love that we started in this world of a PG ghost movie. Then it got elevated into kind of an R-rated, ghostly, gruesome slasher movie. And then it just became a full-on free-for-all bloodletting. I mean, I don't know if we're going to have Jerry's today, but the best death is from this fucking film. There's a woman who takes 4 kitchen knives to the throat and then bleeds out horribly in front of the married couple. Totally deserving of her fate, but it is an absolutely grisly and horrifying death. Like, wow. And because I didn't know what was going to be around each corner, and because I was so happy with what was, I'm pretty enthusiastic about We Are Still Here. And I would encourage any horror fan to check it out. So... It maybe,
I thought it was good.
It falls short of perfection, but please watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's got to be one of the 2 most memorable movies on the list. It definitely has a style of its own that it nails, even with what I perceived as the big tone shift, sort of between the second and third act. I thought they handled that really well. It just occurred to me as I was going through my notes, the young couple, the ones that came into the house to have sex, and then they got killed, the ghost actually chased her out really far. She drove away.
Yeah,
and
that
she
was kind
like
of weird, wasn't it?
miles away, but the ghosts got her. But if the ghosts can leave the house to get people, why didn't they get the town?
That's a good point.
And why hadn't they done that forever? Like, it's those kind of inconsistencies that I think, if they just thought that kind of thing out a little bit more, I think it would have been even that much better.
You're right, because it attacks her while she's in the car. I had it in my head that maybe they were stuck to the house. I don't know. They don't answer every corner of the plot, but while I was watching the movie, I was fully engaged. And I stand by my statement of, if you're a fan of horror movies, you should watch them.
Mark. Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Grave Encounters. Psychiatric hospitals like this were seen as sort of a dumping ground for embarrassing family members rather than a place that they could go to actually get help.
Many of them were severely disturbed. It's truly frightening.
I swear to God that I saw someone right at the end of the hall there.
And he swears that something pushed him off the ladder.
So you guys see this window here? I lock it up real good at night. Come back in the morning. Sometimes this thing's wide open.
Tonight, my crew and I, using the most sophisticated in ghost hunting equipment, we're in search of definitive proof of spirits that were unsettled in life and possibly unsettled in the afterlife. Is there someone here with us?
Here's a movie called Grave Encounters, written and directed by the Vicious Brothers.
They probably think that helps their movie, but it doesn't help their movie.
There's a few of these, the brothers people, the Coen brothers obviously being the most famous and the most awesome.
Who are the Coen brothers?
The Coen brothers? Never heard of them? They're obscure, yes. The Hughes brothers, or I'm missing a bunch, the Wachowski siblings.
Yeah, Lana now, rather than Larry.
No, nobody wants to be Larry. Nobody wants to be Larry. This makes use of another great location, which is a real facility somewhere around Vancouver. Mm-hmm. They used to shoot tons of episodes of Millennium and X-Files using that as the location in that same location.
Oh, really?
It's not been used as a hospital for a long time, but it's one of the most filmed locations, apparently, out there. But instead of just using like a dirty, dusty hallway or a big empty room or a corner of this facility, they actually use the whole facility as,
they make use of some pretty creepy surroundings.
The location.
Mm-hmm.
And they also, we were talking again about these Discovery faux documentary, cheesy ghost hunty shows.
Mm-hmm.
I think it sort of puts those shows a little bit in the crosshairs. I remember I kind of... because I wanted you to like the movie. I remember I kind of
warned me a little bit.
I warned you, you're going to start off and you're probably not going to like some of these characters and you're not going to be sure about the acting. There's a deliberate cheesiness to the beginning of the movie that I can concede might be off-putting to some people, but you got to stay with this movie because I think if you do, you'll be rewarded.
But I thought it was pretty, even if you hadn't mentioned that to me, I thought the movie... did an excellent job. Particularly, it's mostly the main character's performance that does what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I got it right away. I understood that he was supposed to be a bit of a jagoff who, didn't give two shits about the truth of these places.
It's not that he doesn't believe in ghosts. It's that he wants to make the best ghost show that he can make.
Yeah.
And if that means he's got to bribe the...
It'd be great if there were real ghosts.
If they were
there.
real,
yeah.
that would be awesome.
Yeah.
If we get some real footage, great.
Yeah.
But if I have to pay the custodian to tell me a bullshit story on camera, I'm willing to do that. If I have to hire an actor to be the psychic for the show, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And I love the way everybody is in on the joke. Even the members of the crew who are quote-unquote serious about it know that they're in a TV show and come to this place with no real expectations.
That this dude pulls this shit every episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think this is like the 8th episode of the series that they were saying, something like that. So
they've
been at it together for a while.
The producer says that it doesn't air after the 5th, so and this is why. Because this footage...
Because of the film.
They didn't air anymore after they discovered everyone disappeared and they found this footage.
Yeah. The trailer for this movie went viral on YouTube. It sort of became popular before it was released because they cut together a really cool haunted house trailer out of it. And I think they actually brought the goods. When I saw the movie, I was surprised at how effective it was. It actually creeped me out a little bit. So I'm curious to hear what you thought of it.
Well, I love good haunted house stories. This one in particular was remarkably similar to a short film that I wrote and semi-produced years ago.
Nice.
It was I was teaching drama to a group of kids, and that year the coordinator had decided to switch it to a film program. So once we realized the kids didn't really want to be as involved to the point where they would write their own movie, I took the reins and was like, okay, I'll write a ghost story for you. And they loved it. When we did like our first teaser sequence, they were like, oh, this is great, we got to finish this story. And so I wrote the pilot for a TV show that was very much this. It was like a group of filmmakers who, it was sort of like the antithesis of this, in that it was a group of filmmakers who went to supposedly haunted places purposefully to debunk the legend. And of course,
find the real deal.
So they're non-believers who stumble. It's like a bunch of Scullys who stumble upon haunted.
The real deal.
Yeah, the real deal. So as soon as I realized that's what it was about, I got all excited and was like, "This is the movie we could have made." You know? And it is pretty effective. The acting's really convincing for the most part. The psychic is very entertaining, but kind of the weak point of the film, I think, mostly because he's the only actor I recognized.
Right.
I don't even know from what. His mug was so recognizable.
My wife was watching some terrible fantasy show, and he showed up, and I don't know what it was, but the special effects looked like sci-fi movie level. I can't remember.
He was a wizard or something? He has a real wizard face.
Legends, maybe?
The Seeker, based on a kid's book.
Something like that,
yeah.
But yeah.
It was, I don't know, lots of scares, and scares that were like one step below effective scare, where I recognized what they were going for, but it didn't quite work. Like when the same dude, the psychic, gets thrown across, like choked in midair and then thrown across the room. It would kind of creep me out, but at the same time, I was like, this is different from the rest of the movie in some way, where they just took it to a place that deprioritized the suspension of disbelief a little bit.
I think
just to have like a money moment that would look good in the trailer,
right.
You got to have your trailer moments. And you tell me, I never saw the trailer. Was that moment in the trailer?
Just his sort of body going down the hallway and hitting the ground, just that thump.
So
we didn't see the initial.
They
lift.
Saved some of it,
but basically it was just a lot of the boost scares, a lot of the CG, and the computer graphics, which are in it a lot, don't bother me as much in this movie as it does in some of the other movies.
Where were their computer graphics?
Like when the ghost turns and opens its mouth, and its mouth is way too big for its face. They've all augmented that with that would computer and things like that. And just little augmentations.
The hands coming out of the walls.
Absolutely.
Which was terrifying.
But I think that the movie does a smart thing by taking you a little bit off balance at the beginning, because the guy is such a chotch. The lead host is like got a Pat Eubanks sort of vibe going on to it.
Yeah.
You sort of almost get knocked back into satirical funny mode for a second.
Yeah.
So when it starts to get a little bit more scary, you're like, oh, okay, here we go. Here comes the scary. I didn't anticipate it to go as hard and dark as it did. Mm-hmm. And I liked that it went there. And it sort of, like I say, it caught me out of surprise, because in a way, the whole jokey tone of it sort of thought, okay, we're going to have sort of these guys are going to be taught a lesson to take supernatural things seriously. Yeah. No, they're going to be fucking killed brutally.
Yeah. I was, same thing. I was kind of expecting like Blair Witch Light.
Yeah.
Sort of. I guess probably for the same reasons, that he was just like, there was something goofy about him. But it was goofy in line with setting him up for a fall that made sense over the course of the film, I guess. Because by the end, when he's all alone in the tunnel and has to go to sleep because he's so tired, but there's nobody to like stand guard, that was terrifying. And it wouldn't be if his characterization had not been effective from the start of the film.
The journey from super cheesy, I'm on TV, to I'm going to eat a rat.
Yeah.
To sustain myself.
Yeah.
Because I'm starving to death.
Because I've been here for what seems like weeks now at that point.
That is a pretty effective journey. And there's a wide gap in between. And we see a lot of the steps. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
Yeah.
And I give big kudos to him. And again, like I said, at first I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if I liked him. And then once I saw where he was going, I liked him a lot. So.
Yeah. This movie had, like you mentioned, the moment that most of these movies have where somebody says, "What are you filming me for, fool?" That
absolutely.
kind of thing. This movie has that moment.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly where it happened, but I remember clocking it when I was watching it and being like, "Oh, come on! Like, why you gotta do that?"
And
I think it was the token black guy who said it, right?
And in that scenario, what else are you going to do? Like, I mean, you can't leave. It's been established they can't leave the place, and they have the camera equipment. Like,
they also. I don't remember a specific line of dialogue that sets it up, but I got the impression that the only reason they could see as effectively as they could in most of the scenes was because they have night vision on the camera.
Yeah. And lights mounted to the camera.
Yeah. Like, the one camera shoots night vision, right? And the other one has
again,
light
you've got a lot of other problems to deal with. This seems almost minor compared. Let the guy run the camera if it makes him feel better. The batteries will die sooner or later.
Yeah.
Let's not sweat the small stuff. Another brilliant use of the conceit is we get a good walkthrough of all the creepy locations when they first get there, and they show us the room with the bathtub, and they show us the room with the window, and they show us all of those locations that are going to be used again later on, and they do it in that cheesy TV special way. The window sometimes opens by itself. Then maybe someone slit their wrists in this bathtub. Or maybe they didn't. We don't know, but it's a creepy story, right? We get payoffs on all of those rooms later on.
Yeah.
And when you return to those rooms in the dark of night, when they're wandering by themselves, either to collect equipment or whatever conceit that they've come up with to break them up, and they do that successfully several times. Separate the group in ways that don't make me go bullshit. It works. It works. I think that. Because of the map out of it being an investigation of a haunting, they really were able to plant seeds and then pay them all
plant
off.
seeds while also, like, one of the things that I appreciated about this one is that while Blair Witch has a significant amount of setup before it really becomes terrifying, the setup is not really that scary. It's suspenseful, but it really reads like setup in retrospect. Whereas this one, because of the nature of the rooms that they're exploring, I found it was the opposite. I was creeped out just watching them explore. Like when he stands in the middle of the shower room and his voice echoes that certain way, it's creepy already. You know it's going to get, or you hope it's going to get creepier later, but it's already kind of scary.
Yeah. They take their time with the first half of the movie to work your nerves so that when the scares come for the second, 40 minutes or so of the movie, they come pretty fast and furious, and they work effectively. I think that does require a little bit of patience. It is, again, another one of these movies you got to meet halfway. But I think if you're willing to do it, this is a really fucking good found footage movie. And it surprised me. I was kind of preparing myself for it to go the other way when I sat down to watch it.
It wasn't a well-received movie. From what I've read.
People seem to be mixed on it. I'm a big fan, I gotta say. I genuinely liked it.
There's things
I watch
that are
a lot
cheesy
of horror
about it,
movies.
but it's really quite entertaining and scary.
I watch a lot of horror movies, Jaron, and I can see a jump scare coming a mile away. And I gotta say, I jumped a couple times watching this movie.
Yeah, at moments where I didn't expect to. I was like, oh wow, it really got me there.
And it's not just necessarily about a sudden loud noise, which is an easy cheat. It's just a well set up boo, and there's a lot to be said about it.
Yeah.
You watch the special features on this film, you see these kids being interviewed, and they look like they're 17 years old, and they're these goth kids who have watched way too many
These are the
movies.
Vicious Brothers you're talking about?
I don't know how old they are. They look like they're kids, but I'm going to say they're in their 20s. But I gotta say, this was their first time out, and they gave good movie. And apparently they're doing an alien abduction thing coming up, and I will give that a look. There is a sequel to Grave Encounters.
Have you seen it?
I have it. If you want to have a look, I can lend it to you.
Is it really bad? You sound like you don't like it.
I am disappointed. I don't think it's a 100%
They wrote
catastrophe.
it. The Vicious Brothers
They wrote it. A different guy directed it.
Yeah.
And they went a brave direction with it, I will say. But I love me the original. And, just give me a good haunted house movie. I don't think you need to overcomplicate it necessarily. But conversation for another day. The bullet point here is Grave Encounters. If you like scary movies, you should watch it.
Yeah, thumbs up for Grave Encounters.
Call me Martin. I've seen things you wouldn't believe. Things a boy shouldn't see. I was like any other kid. I didn't believe in the boogeyman. Then the world woke up to a nightmare.
Welcome to STAKELAND, kid. your boots on, your guns ready. We're gonna put some distance between us and this place.
We're on our own now, traveling through a ruined land. We live by his rules or we die. Or worse, we die and we come back.
How many of those things have you killed?
Not enough.
Like Mr. says, live free or die trying.
Keep your weapons close and ready.
What are you gonna do?
Okay, last but in no way least, I would like to talk about this STAKELAND movie. And I think this is another one of those vampire movies by way of zombie movies.
Yeah.
Because the vampires are very zombie in that they're everywhere, and you're sort of a constant siege state. We are greatly outnumbered. It's a post-apocalyptic world, basically, that we're introduced to. But for a 98-minute movie, this thing feels epic.
Holy crap, yes.
The scope of it seems large, and it's from Glass Eyed Pix, produced by Larry Fessenden, who I'm a big fan of, and it's directed by Jim Mickle and co-written by Jim Mickle, and its star Nick Dempsey. I'm terrible with these names.
Yeah, that's all right.
I've never seen him before, but he co-wrote the script and he plays Mr.
Yeah.
in the film, sort of the main mysterious man with no name.
Yeah.
And Mr., our protagonist, picks up Kid, who has survived alone an attack on his family by vampires, and they basically survive together in this post-apocalyptic world of vampires. Daylight is safe; they can travel by day, but at night they gotta find a hole that's deepened, and they gotta be safe.
And barricade it, and barricade it, and barricade it.
There are pockets of humanity here and there. There are safe zones, and they're trying to get to the paradise lost that is Canada.
Huzzah!
It may be chilly here, but there's less vampires apparently.
Exactly.
So it's basically an epic quest north, and there is, in typical sort of road movie fashion, seems to be chapters to this.
Mm-hmm.
This happens, then this happens, then this happens. There's a lot of names in here that will give it some sort of cult credibility. Larry Fessenden being the big one for me, but Danielle Harris is basically been in horror movies since she was a little kid. And some of the early Halloween movies, and then when she grew up, she was in the Halloween remakes, and she's been all over sort of direct-to-video horror, slasher, sexy fun romp horror movies for a while. She brings her own audience. And interestingly, a supporting role from Kelly McGillis of Top Gun and many 80s films. And she's sort of come into her own lately, doing supporting roles in horror movies like this one. No longer sort of the sex symbol that she was in the 80s, now sort of reinvented as sort of a character actress.
Yeah.
There's lots of things to like about this movie, but it has a mean streak. So, Damien, please do tell me what you thought of STAKELAND.
Of all the movies, of all these movies, this one was the most intense, visceral, oh my god, you just didn't do that, did you? Like, it did not pull any punches. Originally, I had watched it, or tried to watch it, close to the time of when it had first come out, and I was not perhaps in the best frame of mind or prepared, because I had seen, there was a series of trailers, and I don't know if you'd seen the trailers leading into this film, but they were basically the trailers showing the night of Martin, who's the boy character, who gets picked up by Mr. I'm saying that right? Yeah, Martin. And it's just him in his room, and he's just chilling, and he's like looking around, and it's dark, and all of a sudden you see a quick snap of him like white, his lips are kind of like peeled back a bit, and he's gasping and freaking out, and then it snaps, and then you hear his mom calling him.
Yeah.
Right? And so there was like 2 of those leading into this. So I'm like, I'd seen that, and I thought, okay.
You were prepared for what was going on.
I thought I was prepared. I was like, but only amplified what was coming within the first 5 minutes. So I'd originally watched this before, and I'd seen the first 5 minutes, and then I stopped because it starts off with an absolute bang. Martin, the boy, ends up going outside. It's been established that they need to get out of wherever the heck they are right away. It's nightfall. Bad things are happening. Counterintuitive logic. You think running outside into the dark to chase... I think he was chasing his dog or something like that. He's like, no, don't go outside. Apparently that was the safe place to go. Because the nightmare began unfolding on the inside. And that's when we run into Mr. Sorry, kids. Spoilers, sweeties. Spoilers.
We make spoiler warning at the top of the show.
All right.
They'll know to expect that.
Okay, I just like shouting spoilers. And then things start getting butchered on the inside. And then you run into the ever so sweet and charming Mr. who... says, he really endears himself to Martin with the first line is like, here's a gun, if you shoot me, I'll fucking kill you. It was like really charming.
He's not going to give him any kind of points for the fact that his entire family has just died in front of you. In front of him. And I think what you keep glossing over.
I'm getting there. I'm trying. I'm really working towards it. He comes into the house and he's shining the flashlight, and there's his dad dying. There's his mom already dead. She was the first one to shout at him and scream, and was dragged screaming back into the house. And then the light comes up to the second floor where the vampire is. And you hear the baby crying. The baby's crying, and then the baby stops crying. And then the light comes up, and you see him having a little snack pack with the baby, like a little rotisserie, like a piece of meat corn, and then just casually drops the dead baby. And at that point, that was the sound of my brain breaking the first time.
Here's the thing, we do not see shit like that very often at all.
Holy crap,
It's the sort of thing where it would be an instant NC-17, and it's probably the reason why this movie only had a very limited theatrical release.
Yeah.
It's so fucking harsh, and in a way, I don't think we see anything quite that harsh again through the movie, but it's the classic sort of horror movie trick is saying, by the way, we're not sparing you anything. In this movie, vampires are fucking scary.
Yeah.
And they will kill you. And they have no problem about it. They're not going to stop and fall in love with your teenage daughter. They're not going to, show sympathy to your baby. A baby's an easy meal.
Yeah.
And this is the world that he has woken up to. I think the biggest question about that scene, and I like to think that it's a plague that happened very quickly, that they got the notice to leave and they were just hearing it now. Because the real question is, why did they choose to wait till sundown to leave? It's established that vampires can't travel during the day. But whatever the reason, this kid loses his entire family and is basically adopted by Mr. And he teaches him how to fight and survive and live in this new world.
Yeah.
This new world that Mr. seems strangely built for. Like, he seems to not only survive, but somewhat thrive here.
I have a friend, I watched this with a friend of mine, Slade, and he had a very interesting theory about who Mr. actually is. Because Mr. just sort of suddenly appears, just kind of out of nowhere in a way.
An imaginary friend, savior figure?
I don't know. I mean, it's very interesting because I'm going to jump around a little bit because at the end... Mr.'s gone mysteriously, and it's not like he was killed or died. He's just gone.
I understand that inclination, and I think that it could be interpreted that way. I think Mr. is a real character. Obviously, other characters interact with him. He has conversations.
Yeah, and then there is actually material and physical evidence left.
That would be a cool and interesting, different movie.
Yeah,
but no, I think we can take it at face value.
Yeah.
When I just go to speak to the general harshness of the tone of the movie, because that's what I would want to prepare people for. A scene that got edited out, but that you can see in the extra features. I don't know if you checked them out.
I actually didn't.
There's a scene where a couple of guys come upon a nun who was burying her sister who had died, and seeing this woman on her own at a church, decide it would be nice to rape her.
Right. We did see the fallout from that.
We saw the aftermath of that. But there's just a scene where the car stops and she looks up the hill and they see her and she sees them. And there's a scene where one of the guys just immediately pulls off this smock he's wearing and he's stark naked underneath and he just starts walking towards her. And it's just another one of these like shocking moments where like there's not even a conversation between the two of them. Oh, you're a woman? Well, I'm going to rape you. Then this is the world that we live in, and this is the harshness that you're going to be subjected to.
Yeah.
The Kelly McGillis character is found by Mr. and the kid and sort of joins their group for a while, and that's sort of the movie. It's a series of harsh events. There's a brief reprieve where they find a small civilization and get some supplies. They are introduced to this Daniel Harris character who is pregnant and wants to head north with them because she wants to be safe.
Yeah.
And the word is that the vampires, being cold-blooded creatures themselves, do not like the cold. So the farther north you go, the fewer of them you have to deal with.
Yeah. And that is an interesting moment too, because the nun character had broken off briefly at some point. Had gotten separated from them, and she had actually been there, and was briefly reunited. And it was like a beautiful, tiny. They even had a slow motion moment where the boy Martin who had grown attached to the nun character, and her representation. Because he would always be, carrying around little icons like the Virgin Mary, little crosses. He'd place them places, and Mr. would have his little comments of just like, we don't have time for no history.
Yeah.
So...
anything like that is just weakness, according to Mr.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably one of the things we should also I will talk about that little sunshine moment and its interruption, but to backtrack a bit is the cults, the death cults that arose, that were this weird, bizarre hybrid of Christianity and vampirism mixed together.
It's sort of a can't beat 'em, join 'em type of thing. I figure if they leave offerings for the vampires, perhaps they will last longer. It's this sort of despicable evil, again, that lends more credulity to my sort of theory that this is a zombie movie disguised as a vampire movie. Whereas in zombie movies, you'll find that zombies are the threat that everyone has to overcome. Mm-hmm. But the real villains become other people.
Yeah.
That's what we see in the cult here. And I think this would almost be like a 10-star movie for me. But that's one of the fatal flaws, I think. Well, maybe not fatal, but a flaw for sure. That a character that we are introduced to in the first half of the movie shows up again at the end of the movie to present himself as a big bad. If this was a video game, he would be the boss that you fought at the end of the level. And he's not consistent with any kind of vampire type we've seen up to this point. Mm-hmm. And he's convenience. His character is just overly convenient. For the amount of ground they're covering, they could have just run into another band of baddies. I don't think that they needed to create a supervillain. Mm-hmm. I think that the world was the supervillain.
The world was the supervillain.
I think that bringing that character back specifically is the one plot point that I have real issues with.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I think that the fact that they went that hard, this is not sort of thing that I would want to see all of the time. I don't want every movie to feature a baby eating. I can. But I respect the guts that it takes to do that. And in doing it early in the movie, it reminds me of the first episode of The Walking Dead. I don't know if you've seen that, but one of the first things you see in The Walking Dead TV shows, it's seriously the first scene, so spoilers, but is that Rick, the main character, comes upon the zombie of a little girl holding a doll. Yeah. And he pulls the trigger and blows her brains out.
I did see that.
And that was the first thing you see in the show. And it's basically saying, if you don't like this, stop now. Like you turning off the movie 5 minutes in, fair game. I bet you that has been the experience for a lot of people in this movie. Yeah. But like I was looking for sort of a fun, you thought Near Dark was a dark, brutal vampire movie. Until you watch
STAKELAND.
They're going to say, no, we're going to show you a dark, mean, brutal fucking vampire movie.
Yeah.
And that's what this comes with.
Oh.
And we're not done. Like,
there's pages to talk about.
They did edit the guy, like, approaching the sister character to rape her. They took that scene out, but other scenes aren't spared. The one character who is pretty much managed almost entirely to keep her humanity, probably because she's lived in the settlement for so long, we kind of like, and we understand her motivation to try and find a safe place for her baby.
Oh yeah.
But the movie had already been harsh enough that the second that she got in the car, for me, I knew she was dead.
Yeah.
I knew that this woman was going to die. She was not going to see the happy ever after. And true to that point. But she dies slowly and badly. And like, no punches once again.
No.
And so you may need to wear an apron for this one. Like, it is a bitter pill, but it is entertaining and scary in a way that very few vampire movies are.
Yeah, it became like, speaking of like the environment being the massive predator, once Mr. had made it known that he was not going to tolerate the death cult in any shape or form, spectacularly by throwing his giant wooden throwing star through the back of the son of the bad guy, killing him.
He was a rapist and a murderer.
Yeah.
No harm, no foul.
Yeah, he didn't care. They started leaving little messages for him on the roadways, like, "Where are you, mister?" And I'm like, oh boy, it was creepy. Mr. was a spectacular force of nature in himself, because even though they had captured him at one... Spoilers, sweetie! Yeah. They had captured him and strung him up and had pretty much taken away everything, and they're like, ha ha ha, we're gonna... He got his way out, and he made it back to his car before Martin did.
Yeah.
And that was another scary part too. When Martin making the choice to try and make it back to the car by nightfall, and he's running, and he's going from tree to tree to tree. I was genuinely terrified for him.
And that's because they made this world as real and horrifying as possible. Nobody's safe in this world. In another movie, we would say, okay, well, we just saw this kid survive an attack on his family, so he's our protagonist, ergo he is safe.
No, I never felt he was safe.
But we never feel that in this movie.
There was no safety, and he barely gets back to the vehicle, and Mr. had been already there, holed up, and just like, oh man. And then there was the hint of, right early in the movie, where Mr. was talking about the berserkers. Yeah. The vampires that are very hard to kill because they're
so fast and crazed.
And they have, and in addition to their mad strength, they have an exoskeleton armor that you can't punch their heart out. You have to like do this narrow pin pricking through the back of the skull, and I'm like, oh my god. And so there's the scene in the junkyard. And then you see things loping, and I'm like, okay, is it the death cult? No. Okay, there's movement. Oh, they're vampires. Oh my god, they're the berserkers. And then the terror. And then they're running by cornfields, and I'm like, nothing ever good came from a cornfield. Nothing ever good came from the cornfield. Let's go into the cornfield. What are you doing? Oh my god! And just like freaking out, and...
the psychological despair of everyone, too. You can totally understand this kid hating vampires and having seen his family killed by them. But there's a scene where there's a dead vampire laying in a pool of water, and the kid's just laying there throwing rocks at the corpse. There's something really fucking dark about that, you know?
It's terrifying.
The sister character, speaking of spoilers,
when
faced with the confrontation of taking her own life or being eaten by these predators, takes her own life.
Yeah.
Even knowing that's a sin. But that's the level of darkness that the world has achieved.
Yeah, if she doesn't...
That's the last word she says before she pulls the trigger. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And but I'm not going to stand here and just get eaten.
Or be turned into one of the monsters. It was heartbreaking. It was utterly heartbreaking. Just backtracking briefly... the part that made me laugh and giggle and shriek, probably inappropriately, was exactly... They're in the paradise, and that slow motion scene I described before, and he's just meeting the sister character, and then they're airlifting vampires in.
Yeah.
The vampires...
To rain down on top of the town?
On top of this town from the death cult, because we can't have nice things in this world. That was a huge dick move. I was amazed. I'm like, I already disliked these people. Now I'm...
But it's an interesting trope that once you're aware of, it might actually hurt your enjoyment of future films. So I'm going to apologize in advance for that.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you're in a horror movie, a post-apocalyptic movie, or a science fiction fantasy movie where they establish a safe haven, expect that safe haven to be destroyed.
Oh, yeah.
At some point.
Yeah.
And so the second we got there, I kind of expected that scene to come, but that's a symptom of watching thousands of horror movies.
Oh yeah, no, I knew something was going to go down. I just thought it was very inventive that they were airlifting vampires in through helicopters. I thought, I don't know if it's right to laugh, but I was giggling. I thought it was kind of like,
well, points for creativity.
Exactly. Like, oh wow.
I think the bullet point here is that this is a very strong horror movie,
Yes.
and I endorse it. But I would say go in knowing what you're getting into. This is a hard R horror movie with teeth,
and it will chew you up.
Why don't you get Billy dressed? I'll take him into town with him. Hit the store before it gets all bought out.
How'd you folks hold up in the storm?
Big insurance day.
Sorry to hear that. What's going on?
It's death.
Something in the mist! Shut the doors! Shut the doors!
The only way we're going to help ourselves is to seek rescue.
Tie this around your waist.
What for?
It'll let us know you got at least 300 feet.
There's nothing out there. Nothing in the mist.
What if you're wrong?
Then I guess the joke would be on me.
So Frank Darabont has had a great deal of success in adapting Stephen King.
Yeah, he seems to really get Stephen King.
Yeah.
They get each other. Like, Stephen King loves Frank's work on his behalf. Like,
And apparently Darabont can be a handful, he can be a little bit difficult, but I look at his filmography and say, well, whatever he needs to do, just keep doing what you're doing.
it seems to be working. Yeah.
The Mist is one of the ones that kind of split people. It seemed like surprisingly B-grade from the man who did The Green Mile and, of course, most notably, The Shawshank Redemption. I sort of look at The Shawshank Redemption to sort of be the bright, sunny version to this sort of dark shadow, whereas the themes of Shawshank Redemption are hope, and hope being something that can transition you from horror to a new life. The Mist is about despair. And I think
hopelessness.
And hopelessness. It's about the bleak, bitter counterbalance to that.
Yeah.
And in that way, I will honestly and controversially say here, it is every bit the equal to Shawshank Redemption. It is the dark shadow to the bright sun.
I would definitely agree with you with that. And yet hope still exists in it. At least in the story.
In the story, correct. Basically,
less so in the movie.
Well, the movie does provide, again, they changed from the book, and I think we'll save the ending for a little bit, but I definitely do want to talk about it.
You have to.
The movie changes the ending of the story in that it has one. In the original novella of The Mist, this is basically a roll of paper that have been left at this location, the supermarket, and he documents the occasions and leading up to the point where they leave the supermarket to try to escape the mist and the creatures within it. And what happens to them after the point, we are left to imagine. The movie just takes us a step forward and tells us where they go after they drive off. Basically, a freak storm hits this lake community in Maine, and father and son...
Really? Stephen King?
Set in Maine, I know, weird.
Oh, okay.
What are you going to do? A father and son go out to grab some groceries and emergency supplies, and shortly after arriving at the busy grocery, the town is enveloped in a mysterious fog. And not too long after that, after this mist arrives, we discover that it brings with it these horrible Lovecraftian monsters.
Yeah, it's a very Lovecraftian story.
Each creature more bizarre and horrendous than the last.
Definitely other dimensional.
Yeah.
The only thing I've read of Stephen King's that was even close to as Lovecraftian as this one is, have you read one of his new books, Revival?
I haven't read Revival yet.
It's very Lovecraftian.
Yeah.
It's also kind of a Frankenstein story, but
yeah.
this one it definitely falls under the category of
Lovecraft, absolutely. And I think that it's fairly obviously sort of wearing those influences. He's not trying to slip anything past us.
No.
So we have the basically the citizens of this small town, and they're people that we sort of types that we're familiar with, sort of gruff-speaking Maine drunks,
and
religious zealots,
the local boys that work at the military base,
Yeah.
and the church lady, and
blandly good or blandly bad. People tend to wear white or black hats in Stephen King's universe, and that's both good and bad. But
they tend to wear the white or black hat once the crisis starts.
Yeah.
It's sort of like it ramps up their personality, where they already were. They're fairly normal when it's day to day, but kind of annoying, or just generally nice, and then it gets ramped up once the shit hits the fan.
So Darabont brought his sort of typical crew of actors that he likes to work with. Yeah, Laurie Holden, you'll remember from the first season of The Walking Dead and The Majestic. She shows up here. William Sadler's an actor he likes to work with. Jeffrey DeMunn's an actor he likes to work with. What's the actress's name who plays Carol in the Melissa McBride? I believe this was her first big movie, and
really? Okay.
That sort of got her, into the eyes of Darabont, which got her on The Walking Dead, which she remains on to this day.
And also,
You'll notice a lot of Darabont's people left the show fairly directly after he did.
Yes,
and I think that's some interesting loyalty there. Anyway, that's sort of a side view. It's if you like Darabont, his whole world is represented here, and the regulars show up and do the good work.
Yeah, it was definitely a case of I'm doing a movie and phone up my friends first.
Absolutely. And the rest of the cast that we have worked out here, Andre Braugher sort of shows up as an antagonistic neighbor.
Yeah.
And Thomas Jane is our lead.
Thomas Jane is excellent in just about everything.
About everything, and I will agree with you there. Every now and then, I'm like, "What happened, buddy?" But I've always thought that he's solid.
Mm-hmm.
He's almost too good looking for his own good, because people don't actually notice that he acts sometimes. And I also want to mention Toby Jones, who's a British actor who plays this character
plays Ollie. Yeah,
and I love that character, and I love his performance. He's just a guy.
He's another good example of somebody who's just a decent guy, and the crisis hits, and it ramps up his personality. I'm super decent now.
He's in way over his head, but he does way better than even he expects he will do. He sort of surprises himself and us how well he does given the circumstances.
Yeah, he's just a schlub.
Yeah.
He's a schlub. He's what, assistant manager?
Yeah.
Of this small town supermarket, and all hell breaks loose. Demon dimensions open up outside, and he's one of the few that steps up.
Yeah. Well, and really, for a storekeeper, all hell had already broke loose. A terrible storm came in, the power was out, half the town is in your store trying
the tills aren't working, yeah.
Like, he's already having the worst fucking day of his life, and then monsters show up, right? But he's still, like, just deals with each problem.
Fucking steps up, yeah.
And the
getting shit done, that's what you need in an assistant manager.
Indeed. And, of course, the performance that we're not mentioning enough so far is Marcia Gay Harden.
Oh, yeah.
Because she has a tricky role, to my mind, as this religious zealot. And her name, Mrs. Carmody.
Could easily be a utterly forgettable two-dimensional...
It's a tough sell.
Yeah.
It's a tough sell. Not only is she, like, crazy over-the-top religious that you almost have a hard time believing in, like, the dumbest of small towns in the States.
Yeah.
But that she has enough magnetism and she's able to exploit this scenario of terror that she actually convinces people and talks them onto her crazy.
You could easily see her, well, and she pretty much is by the last scene we see her in.
A cult leader.
A cult leader, yeah, and a very successful one.
Yeah.
That was her calling, apparently.
And just exploiting the people's fears.
Yeah.
And, the main hitch of the story, which I remember reading at a young age and identifying with, and identify with even more now as a father of two, is this father trying to, as much as possible, protect his son from this horrifying scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's that scene in the book which was sort of Darabont's key to sort of solving the riddle of how do you end this movie. There's a very important scene, I think, about halfway through the movie, where his son wakes up in the middle of the night and they have a conversation. And he promises his son that he will not allow his son to be eaten by a monster.
Oh, yeah.
He swears to him that no matter what happens, he will be spared that fate. And he keeps his promise.
Much to the chagrin of many of the moviegoers that went to see this in the theater.
Correct.
Because, this movie in the theater upset a lot of people.
And do you want to talk about why? Should we jump to the ending already? Or is there more you want to say? I've outlined the plot, basically.
I could easily see this is another good example of Stephen King looking at it's a classic horror trope of which is worse, the monsters or the people in here.
Yeah, the monsters within or the monsters without, and it's not subtle in that at all.
Not at all. No,
that's okay.
And Marcia Gay Harden is instrumental in that. But again, like you said, her performance is she manages to make it
creepy.
She manages to make it creepy, but 3-dimensional enough that you don't automatically just relegate her to, like, from the very first scene she walks in, oh, that's a bad guy.
Yeah. I almost believe her more on the screen than I do on the page. That's how much of a compliment that I'm going to pay to Marcia Gay Harden here.
Yeah, she does a wonderful work in this movie.
And it would not be easy to do, because this is a villain that twirls her mustache.
Yes.
Right? And in the way that only Stephen King can so enjoy.
Yeah, tying all the atheists to the train tracks.
And, like, immediately going to the most evil thing. We want to sacrifice. Let's kill the child.
Yeah, sacrifice a child.
That's the first big sort of, like, proclamation she makes, right? Her loving God will be satiated with the death of this child. Kill the child of the guy who I don't like.
Yeah.
Basically. And it's,
But the ending is really the stunner on this one, especially between the book and the movie. In the book, it ends, they've headed off into the mist, everybody in the car is asleep, they lost a few people getting into the car, notably Ollie.
Ollie, sadly. Dude! But you need those deaths that you feel, like, they can't all just be random folks that get taken away by a tentacle.
And not just the bad people or the random people have to die, you have to have a likable one that goes as well, otherwise the stakes are nothing. And they wander off into the mist, and they're trying to get a certain distance away. They're, like, randomly picking a target on the map to head towards, and everybody in the car is asleep, and he's fiddling around with the radio, trying to pick up anything.
Yeah.
And he thinks he hears talking, and he thinks he hears the word hope, and that's where that's the entirety of the hope in the actual story, and then it's cruelly taken away in the movie version.
Yeah, well, basically, after driving through the fog, confirming that indeed his wife had passed away, which he kind of knew, she was not prepared for what was coming, and the main window of their house had been shattered by the storm.
Yeah, they didn't actually find a body or anything, but the house has obviously been...
Anything on the outside had no problem getting into her. The main window of the house was open. So, yeah, that sucks. And then we see some of the best rendering of, for lack of a better word, Lovecraftian monsters.
Pardon the extra noise.
That's okay. Fix your drink.
Adding to the flagon of chuckles.
We see creatures whose legs lift up into the skyline and are obscured by cloud. We see creatures that have flocks of other creatures living underneath their underbelly.
Yeah, those big tall bastards remind me of the original Walker tanks in War of the Worlds.
Right.
Like, that's basically what they are. You can't see the top of them because of the mist. But.
Like, the scale of their adversary, like, and this is described, one of these creatures is described in the book, but actually seeing it in the movie, it's like this incredible, oh my god, what are we up against?
Well, even to the point where the impact tremors that they used in Jurassic Park, to just kind of message the scale of this frickin' thing.
We were fighting weird tentacles and acid-spitting spiders, but what could we possibly do against that?
Yeah.
And like, the further they drive, there's just nothing. Until finally they run out of gas. And Thomas Jane takes out a pistol, as agreed upon with the following survivors, and executes everybody in the car.
But he only has... There's 5 people in the car, there's only 4 bullets.
Yeah.
So he executes the older couple in the back seat.
And his son,
his
and
son,
Laurie Holden.
And Laurie Holden. And then
Nothing
he's
is
out
left.
of bullets. So he walks into the mist.
Yeah. And I think we're even downplaying, as fucking horrible as that is, they make a point that his son wakes up at the last second before he pulls the trigger.
Just in time to see the barrel.
To like maybe process that he was about to be shot by his own father. And that would have been a horrendous ending in of itself. Brutal. Like the Cujo ending that we talked about. Like, everybody would be devastated.
Yeah.
But then
Frank Darabont, prick that he is, pulls out the 1-2 punch.
The mist is receding. The army was but a kilometer behind them.
Not even. He literally
moments.
he walks out of the car to walk into the mist and be taken by the monsters, and a tank rolls by.
Right.
He just got out of the car. They were literally 100 yards up the road.
In fact, the noise of the army, he probably just mistook.
He
as
thought was one of those
creatures.
giant, yeah.
Like, everything goes about as bad for him as it could possibly, and he's left screaming, completely having lost
It's
his
left
mind.
with that crane shot, and you see this giant column of National Guard come in, and the mist is receding, and he's on his knees screaming at the sky, this horrible crane shot. Just like, oh, and the credits.
And I get
oh
why
my God!
Like, that, people were outraged, and people were like that lost the movie for people. They couldn't fucking believe they went there.
My
But I
wife
go back-
hated that ending.
Yeah.
She hates bleak endings like that.
Oh, I watched this with a person, and she was like shaking with anger afterwards. She couldn't quite admit it, but she was very upset by the movie.
I loved the ending, even though it was horrible.
Yeah, but it was the right ending.
Yeah, Stephen King himself, when he was asked,
If he'd have thought of it, he would have wrote it.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said about it.
Yeah.
What do you think about Frank's ending? That if I'd have thought of it, it would have been in the book.
And I don't know if there's a bigger compliment he could have paid Frank Darabont.
No.
And I have to go full circle back to what I said about Shawshank is about hope, and this movie's about despair. When he gives in to despair and pulls that trigger and goes out to kill himself, that's when the sun finally breaks through the mist, right?
Yeah.
It's the reverse of Shawshank.
And
For Shawshank, the darkness is all the time in Shawshank, and he gets that bit of light at the end. But he always had the hope.
And here's where that analogy works better with the movies than it does with the books. Because in the book, you had that little twinge of hope.
Yeah.
Where he's fucking with the radio. Frank Darabont takes that away.
Yeah.
Takes it away utterly. And it's nothing but despair.
Yeah.
Hope is gone. There's no hope in this movie.
So
it left in the second act.
Yeah, I would say like Shawshank and The Mist would be a brilliant double feature. Watch The Mist first, and Shawshank. Will
So
be
you don't kill yourself afterwards.
And Shawshank will be the antidote. The other thing I want to say, and I do think we should wrap this up pretty quickly here. If you can, watch The Mist in black and white. If you get the deluxe director's edition of the movie, they haven't changed any of the scenes, but you can watch the movie in black and white.
I did not know that.
And I actually think that the CG looks better in the black and white version, and it doesn't take anything away from it. Darabont's always wanted to do black and white. In fact, when he was originally trying to get Walking Dead made, his way to get around the violence was that he was going to do it in black and white. So it would be violent, but it wouldn't be as visceral as...
Well, all the blood would be black.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, I love Frank Darabont and I love Stephen King, and therefore, consequently, I love The Mist. Is there anything else you would like to say before we move on?
Yeah, I would say that's a bulletproof combo, Stephen King and Darabont, if it weren't for Dreamcatcher, but that's for a different episode.
But Darabont wasn't on board for Dreamcatcher. Word is that he has the rights for The Long Walk, which that would be interesting. So, yes, that might have been a clip show, but it was a pretty good one, right? It was an epic clip show, and it gave you some good food for thought for things to watch on Halloween. I don't often do these, and I'm sorry if that's irritating that this free podcast would repeat itself, but I have been sick and I have been busy. And if you're curious as to what Rank and Review future holds, well, in 2 weeks you'll be hearing the return of Matthew Risling for another installment of Historic Horror. And after that, our current champion, Mr. Lee Beckmann, and I were going to spend 2 episodes counting down the best horror movies of the 1970s. So, yeah, you gotta wait for it, but I think it'll be worth it. And there's lots more Rank and Review where that came from. As always, thank you so much for listening to my podcast. Please, please, please send me feedback at rankandreview@gmail.com. Let me know some of your Halloween favorites. And please, please, please spread the word on Rank and Review. You have another nerdy movie friend who would like the show. It's just true. Let him know. We're waiting for him. Happy Halloween.